And I've just described the type of incidents that can amount to that, absolutely will not be tolerated. That we take a zero tolerance approach to this sort of behaviour, and it's prosecuted and punished.
The Prime Minister says he won't tolerate foreign states stirring hatred and violence in the UK and says there will be consequences. It's not yet clear if Iran has been behind any of the recent attacks. CEO of the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, Imran Ahmed, has told Tonight with Andrew Marr a lot of the issues start online.
And what do we see online? We see the mass proliferation of conspiracy theories. We see the normalization of dehumanizing language about Jewish people and general anti-Jewish narratives being distributed at scale, amplified by the mathematics of how social media platforms work, where hate and lies are given disproportionate amplification and distribution.
He says the Prime Minister should be applying pressure to Ofcom, which is yet to return a report into anti-Semitism. 4 Palestine Action activists have been found guilty of raiding an Israeli defence firm's UK site in Bristol. A court heard how they used crowbars and sledgehammers to cause around £1 million worth of damage at LBC systems. 2 other people were cleared of causing criminal damage in August 2024. The US denies a ceasefire with Iran is over after hostilities in the Strait of Hormuz reignited yesterday. It followed a promise from Donald Trump to guide stranded ships along the route. Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth is rejecting claims Tehran controls the strait.
2 U.S. commercial ships, along with American destroyers, have already safely transited the strait, showing the lane is clear. We know the Iranians are embarrassed by this fact. They said they control the strait. They do not. So American ships led the way, commercial and military, shouldering the initial risk from the front, as Americans always do.
Iran insists it is just getting started after firing at US warships. Plans are being made to get Britons stuck on board a cruise ship in the Atlantic Ocean home. 3 people have died following a suspected hantavirus outbreak. A British passenger is also in a critical but stable condition in hospital in South Africa. Speaking at a news conference, Maria van Kerkhove from the World Health Organization addressed those on the ship.
We have heard from quite a few people, on the boat. We just want you to know we are working with the ship's operators. We are working with the countries where you are from. We hear you. We know that you are scared. And we're trying to make sure that the ship has as much information as they can.
And Nissan is to combine 2 production lines into one at its Sunderland factory. The car makers also announced 900 jobs are going across Europe. It's unclear how many, if any, are in the UK, but we're told no manufacturing roles will be lost. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 144 points at 10,219. The pound buys $1.35 and €1.15. LBC weather, clearer in the east tonight with the odd shower for North Sea coasts. Isolated showers further west, lows of -1. Much of the UK will be cloudy with sunny spells, mostly for central areas tomorrow. A few light showers possible in the far west and towards eastern England, a high of 15 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 4 minutes past 7 on LBC. Welcome to the programme. It's Iain Dale here with you until 10. Now, my task in the next hour is to make you all very excited about the local elections in England and the national elections in Scotland and Wales on Thursday. It's probably a forlorn task because generally in local elections, the turnout is only about 33-35%. So that means 2/3 of you listening in England probably won't even be voting on Thursday, but you should. And my question to you in this hour is what issues govern your votes, particularly in local elections? Now, obviously in Wales and Scotland, it's rather different because they're not council elections. They're elections for the parliaments in Wales and Scotland. But in England, I get the feeling that people aren't really intending to vote on local issues particularly. And that was emphasised by a survey today, which showed that among Muslim voters, they rank Gaza over the economy and other local election issues. A quarter of Muslim voters in key battleground areas said the conflict would determine their vote, a greater proportion than those who said the economy, housing, healthcare or crime would be the deciding factor, compared to only 5% of the public as a whole. So I think that's quite interesting. But shouldn't it be the performance of your local council that determines your vote? Shouldn't it be local issues, sort of how the council's dealing with potholes, how they deal with housing, etc., etc.? And yet I get the feeling that a lot of people are going to be voting. I mean, Reform UK's campaign is essentially based on, the best way to get Starmer out is to vote Reform. Possibly. I mean, it's a claim that you can make. But what motivates you in the way that you vote in local elections, and let's widen it to the parliamentary elections in Wales and Scotland too, what is going to determine your vote? If you are somebody who is against Scottish independence or Welsh independence, do you sort of hold your nose and vote for whichever party you think stands the best chance of beating the SNP or Plaid? Or if you want independence, is that just going to govern your vote completely? Everyone has very different ideas as to sort of how they should vote or how they do vote. So I'd love to hear from you with your reasoning in just a moment. 0345 6060 973. Aggie Chambray, our Deputy Political Editor, is with me. What issues do you think are governing people? Let's start with England, first of all, in the local council elections and the mayoral elections.
Well, I think you're entirely right, Ian. So Merlin's strategy...
Not often you say that.
I don't think I've ever said that before. Merlin Strategy, a pollster, have found that by a ratio of 2 to 1, voters are voting based on national factors. These are planning to vote based on national factors rather than local factors. Primarily voting, they think, to send a national message rather than what's going on in their, as you say, local council. And a lot of what they're finding is frustration of people. Frustration sort of guiding people on how they're going to vote, whether that be national or local issues. And they do think that this is a change, that this is happening more and more. Although, interestingly, Merlin Strategy did point to the 2024 locals and actually say that was a better guide to what was going to happen in the general election than any polls around the time. But on that Times piece, talking about the war in Gaza ranking above the economy and determining how Muslim voters will cast their vote. Merlin Strategy think that is a big factor on people leaving Labour. And if indeed, as many strategists think will happen, the Greens do extremely well in London, then they think Gaza will have been a huge factor in that. And YouGov have also done, as you'd expect, Ian, some polling on all of this. And they say the roads and potholes are the most important issue for lots of people, for most amount of people. But after that, it's the economy / cost of living, and then the NHS and public health and services too. So it is, you can see, people are thinking about the roads. And interestingly as well, Ian, actually, that's the case. Those three are the top issues for Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem and Green voters. But for Reform UK voters, they are an exception. And roads and cost of living still feature prominently for Reform voters. But this group are most likely to have said immigration was a top issue for them locally too. So I think it does definitely seem like national issues taking precedence, and the sort of frustration that lots of previous Labour voters who were voting for change have not had that change quickly enough, which I think is a thing we hear lots of national politicians, lots of MPs talking about a lot of the time.
It's interesting, if you look at the top 10 issues in this poll from YouGov, only 3 of them could be classified as local. And when Reform UK voters cite immigration, I mean, it's got nothing to do with local elections at all, has it?
No, not at all.
So what about Scotland and Wales? I mean, it's obviously parliamentary elections there, but even there, people probably have some bizarre logic as to the way that they're going to vote.
I think that's true, but I think what's been really, really interesting watching these elections in Scotland and Wales play out is how the Labour vote share seems to have fallen, or Labour seems to have been less and less popular as time has gone on in Westminster. And lots of people talking about how the effect that an unpopular Westminster government has had on voting intentions in Westminster, in Scotland and in Wales too. And the idea that we were talking, last year at stages where Labour could actually win Scotland, now looking at the polls, that looks absolutely, extremely unlikely. And in Wales too, of course, this will be absolutely historic if the polls are correct and Labour are to lose control and power there. And I think lots of people and lots of polls have suggested that the reason for that is because of the unpopularity of the Westminster government.
And the other thing I think that is really quite interesting is that in local elections, turnout is incredibly low. And yet your local vote actually can count for more than a national vote in many ways, because whatever political complexion your local council is, they do have the power to have an effect on your life as a local person, whereas sort of nationally it's more difficult. So I want to also hear from people who have no intention of voting on Thursday. Try and save the sanctimony, though, because I'm so fed up with people who announce that they're not going to vote and they're really proud of the fact that they're not going to vote. Well, you tell that to people in other countries that have fought for decades to have the right to vote. Frankly, they make me sick. Am I going over the top there?
No, I don't think you are going over the top. Fair enough, Iain.
So if you want to make me sick, 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Just justify why you don't intend to vote on Thursday, whether it's in Scotland, Wales or England, because I'm not going to agree with you, because I think everybody has a civic responsibility to cast a vote. And frankly, if you don't vote, don't bother ringing LBC over the next 5 years and complaining that something has gone wrong in that national or indeed local politics that you don't like, because you won't have any right to complain. End of rant. End of Aggie, thank you. So somebody texted about, look, Aggie, says somebody there.
That's nice.
You've got a fan.
Got to get my mum to stop texting in.
Strange tastes. Right, let's move on and let's examine this thing that I mentioned at the beginning, where Muslim voters seem to rank Gaza over the economy in local elections. Ajmal Masroor joins me, imam and broadcaster, stood as an independent candidate in an East London constituency in the 2024 general election. Not enough people stand as independents, I don't think. Ajmal, very good evening to you. Now, I was quite surprised by the result of this poll. What was your reaction to it?
Firstly, I haven't spoken to you for a long time.
I know. Well, we're rectifying that now.
I need to say something to make you sick. You did invite one, but nevertheless, what did I think? I'm not surprised, because people do vote on issues that are very passionate about. For example, Ukrainians would be voting about our policies on the Ukraine.
In local elections?
They would do. Why not? Because they think it is the time to exercise their little right that they have, which is to exercise their views. Obviously, politics per se, we only get a chance once every 5 years to elect our local MP and then local council. We haven't informed our local people sufficiently to know the difference. And you're absolutely right. Local issues should be the more important issues. Education, transport, pothole, all of those local issues. People do absolutely feel passionately about what's closest to their hearts, whether they're Muslim, Jewish or Hindu or people of faith or no faith. Even environmental issues play a massive role in local elections, though most of the environmental policies would be dictated by the House of Commons national issues. Nevertheless, I'm not surprised, and I would be doing the same thing. In fact, I put out a video the other day saying to everybody, don't vote for Labour, because they have supported they have been, Keir Starmer, to be more precise, has supported the genocide in many ways, actively or inactively or verbally or non-verbally.
Well, he would refute that, obviously.
I understand. I've spoken to David Lamio at a personal level, where he said he's not willing to sacrifice his political career to stand up for the Palestinians when he came to our mosque in North London. Yvette Cooper was in the same meeting. So I've said to people, don't vote for Labour Party because they have even left their own principles and policies. I've said to people, don't vote for the Conservatives because, unfortunately, I know you maybe stood as a Conservative candidate once upon a time, but now I think you are looking at over and beyond the party label, more into what issues we should be voting for. But Conservative parties has abysmally failed the Muslim community with its Islamophobic rhetoric. Did you listen to the Shadow Justice Secretary who was demanding that Parliament should condemn Muslims for voting Green in the last by-election? I mean, outrageous. And then I've also said, don't waste your vote with the Lib Dems, not really worth it. Green possibly and then lots of independent. I've said that quite openly now, and I didn't say that before.
I mean, you give the Greens a bit of a free pass there, but I mean, they do seem to have got a reputation now as to being a pseudo-Islam party. That's how they keep being described, which I can see why that might appeal to some Muslims. But in a sense, I'm slightly sad at this turn of events, because I think the more we go down the road of sectarian politics, where one particular religion votes this way, another votes that way, or one interest group predominantly votes for one party and the anti-one votes for a different one. I mean, that is not unifying the country, is it?
I agree entirely, and I wish we didn't do that. Firstly, let me just clarify. I'm not suggesting that Muslims should vote for, or anyone should vote for Green with their eyes closed. I certainly have my serious policy and ethical issues with Green, so I'm not going to be voting for Green myself. But if people want to vote away from the three mainstream parties that have let them down, this could be an option, but I'm advocating independent candidates. Secondly, the point about not bringing our communities together, it's fundamental to democracy that we allow plurality, but not allow division to flourish. What we are seeing now is the politics of cancelling, politics of double standard, politics of hatred, politics anti-immigrant, anti-this, anti-that. Unfortunately, that's the rhetoric of the world, Ian. It's what we're seeing everywhere, from America to our country, to Europe, to Australia, to Asia, even in India. Yeah, today's election outcome had seen BJP winning in Calcutta, which they hadn't won for years, West Bengal to be more precise, and Hindu mobs went out with their bulldozers rampaging and destroying Muslim businesses and households. This is, of course, being led by Narendra Modi, who has been at the forefront of a polarizing figure in the Indian politics. So global narrative is polarizing. Global narrative is pushing us to division. You and I have to work harder to bring our communities together. I'm not sure how, but we've got to speak more.
OK, Ajmal, thank you very much indeed. That's Ajmal Masroor there, Imam and broadcaster. Lots of you want to have your say on this. I'm delighted to see. So we'll come to your calls in just a moment here on LBC. It's 7:17.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
Why don't you get the Prime Minister on the phone and say, come on, Sakir, we've actually got to show some action here.
Straight to the point.
You're going backwards.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
This is not a one-off incident.
Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Download it now from your app store. LBC.
How likely is she to, have another heart attack?
Can I still go to the gym after heart surgery?
Is my mum still my mum if she has a new heart?
When it comes to heart health, no question is too big or small. That's why British Heart Foundation have dedicated cardiac nurses you can speak to by phone, email or online chat.
Hi, this is Chloe from British Heart Foundation. How can I help?
Search BHF Cardiac Nurses.
Switching to Vodafone full fibre broadband is now as easy as pie. Oh, freshly baked. It's a walk in the park. Hello, little fella. It's like taking candy from a baby. Come on, as if I'd do that. With One Touch Switch, it's easy. We sort everything out for you. We even contact your current provider. Plus, we'll help towards leaving fees. Switch today to full fibre broadband with Vodafone.
Up to £200 credit to cover leaving fees. More information and terms at vodafone.co.uk/broadband.
Calling all young creatives. Kickstart your career in media. Apply now and join us in years 10 or 12 at Global Academy. globalacademy.com.
You've packed enough suitcases to know quality when you see it. Well, Saga Travel Insurance has been named a Which Best Buy. And now get 20% off when you buy before the 11th of June. Search Saga Travel Insurance for a quote today. New policies only. Standard and Plus are Which Best Buys May 2025. Terms and conditions apply. Over 50s only.
Iain Dale on LBC.
19 minutes past 7. Archie in Inverness says, years ago I vowed to never vote again, and I stuck to my resolve. But the current purge on welfare claimants has persuaded me to do my civic duty and vote SNP, the only party that does not hate the sick. Archie, I don't know what newspapers you've been reading, but there are, what was the figure I read the other day? 60,000 new benefit claimants every week. Well, I mean, how is that leaving the sick to their own devices. It's just complete fiction, Archie. I'm not suggesting you go back to your days of not voting, but you seem to be voting on a rather strange reason there. Right, let's go to Katrina, who's a new caller in Falkirk. Hello, Katrina.
Hi there, Ian.
Hi.
Hiya. The reason that's prompted my call is the fact that you said that people who don't vote make you sick.
Yep.
Now, normally I value your opinion. However, I'm one of those people who quite often doesn't vote. And I do that as for quite a principled decision, not just because I can't be bothered or I don't value my right to vote, more because I do actually value my right to vote. That I'm not going to throw it away on a candidate that I don't agree with. There's no option in this country for a none of the above.
Well, there is actually.
There's a spoil your vote.
Yeah.
But it's not always clear. Now, there's accidental voting happens when people spoil their vote, and it's never made clear that spoiled votes are actually deliberately spoiled votes. We're all just lumped in together with people who don't know how to vote, or so unless they actually put a formal way of counting spoiled votes, I'm not going to go along and vote.
Well, you could actually just write on the ballot paper, this is a spoiled ballot paper because I don't respect any of the candidates.
But that doesn't get counted.
Well, it does get counted. It gets counted in the sort of other pile. There is a figure that's released by the returning officer for every constituency of the number of spoiled ballot papers.
I think they've stopped doing that now.
Well, I can't speak for Scotland, but in England they certainly haven't. I mean, admittedly, you have ones which are unclear, but they count as spoiled. There are others where someone will have drawn a willy on it, and that counts as spoiled. And then there are people who have deliberately written something to make clear that their ballot paper is spoiled.
But that also as well, though, there are people who have spoiled their paper, and that's been counted as a vote. Because if you don't spoil it properly, and if you just happen to put your mark in one of the boxes, that can get counted.
Well, yes, but it sounds to me, Katrina, and please don't take this the wrong way, he said, hopefully, but it sounds like an excuse not to get off your backside and go down to the polling station.
Because I have done both. I've voted. I've stood for election. I've been along and spoiled my paper, and
we'll do it again.
And the cleanest I've ever felt was the one time that I didn't actually vote. I actually felt cleaner after that election than I had for any other election.
Well, bully for you for feeling cleaner. But the fact is that there will be one party on the ballot paper. Whatever you think of the individual candidates, there will be one party that you agree with slightly more than the others.
There isn't, though.
I don't believe it. I mean, you've got a multiplicity of parties in Scotland now, 7 parties to vote for. Well, if you don't like any of them, form your own. Stand as an independent.
Bizarrely, I have actually done that in the past. I'm probably not allowed to say, but I am involved with another party. But as you know, standing for election is actually quite difficult.
So you're involved with a party, but you won't vote for it?
In Scotland, they would be in the regional vote. Because for one of the really difficult things for small parties is the £500 deposit that you've got to put up. Now, for a small party that doesn't get funding from crypto or anywhere else, it's really difficult, and that means that a lot of the candidates have got to put up the £500 themselves.
No, I
get a lot of votes.
I understand
and
that.
You lose that money.
I understand that. But if they're standing on the regional list, go and vote for them on the regional list.
And I will do that in this coming up election.
So you are going to vote?
I'll vote on the second vote, but I'm not going to vote on the first.
Well, that's fine. But at least you're going down to the polling station and voting, or doing a postal vote, or whatever you do. So we've gone through all this conversation, and you are actually going to vote?
On this one, I am.
I feel I've won.
But you haven't, though, because...
Yeah, I'm getting claps in the gallery there. They are clapping me for trouncing your weak arguments, Katrina.
Oh, I'll leave that to your audience to decide who won that argument.
OK, Katrina, thank you very much indeed. Well, an entertaining call to start with. Jay in Wilston is also very entertaining whenever he phones in. Hi, Jay.
Hi, Ian. Nice to speak to you again. Right, I feel compelled to win this one. I've got to go 2-0 up before we even
Well, you usually do, so carry on.
Right, so I don't actually normally vote, but we can come back to that in a moment because my primary point was about the Gaza issue that you raised. So I won't be voting solely on the Gaza issue, but it will be a primary issue, perhaps even a decisive issue. But there'll be some balance there. So, for example, I won't be voting Green because they are slightly bonkers, let's be frank about it. So that sort of draws me to the Lib Dems, where they're clearly...
You're only slightly less bonkers.
Well, I mean, right now, I would argue all our parties are bonkers, including Labour, Conservative and Reform. So whenever you vote, you're voting for the least bonkers rather than the most sane, aren't you? So on balance, I will probably vote Lib Dems. But I wanted to really pick up on your point that, that it's regrettable that it's all religion-based. I don't think it is about religion. Many people that aren't Muslim or aren't Palestinian or Arab will still be voting for Green or Lib Dems because of the Gaza issue. And there'll be many Jewish people that do, including the Jewish bloc that often lead the pro-Palestine protests in central London. Let me give you another example. If the British government wasn't supporting Ukraine and was actually on the side of Russia, I would vote on that whole issue. But I don't need to worry about that because my Prime Minister and my government do support Ukraine and do oppose Russia. Likewise, if my government was supporting Iran, I'd be out on the streets protesting against Iran and protesting against my government if they supported Iran. But they don't. Gaza is a unique issue because the government is supporting the very country that is oppressing the Palestinians. And that's the distinction. It's not a Muslim issue. It's not an Arab issue. It's an issue of justice and balance and fairness. And I think that's the key point that I think needs to be captured.
Well, it is a Muslim issue when you look at what 1 in 5 Muslims or 1 in 4 intend to vote on Gaza as an issue in these elections. But for the wider electorate, it's 5%.
Yeah, it may be for some, but I wouldn't say it's all. Full declaration, let me be honest here, I am Muslim, but that's not the primary reason why it's important to me. It's important to me because it plays on my conscience every night when I go to bed that the Gazans are suffering so immensely, and my government that I pay taxes to is supporting that suffering of the Palestinians. Happily, I go to bed not worrying that my taxes are going to support the Russian army in crushing the Ukrainian population. So I think it's a issue of conscience that you have to take into account, not about faith. Like I say, I would have voted against the Labour Party if they were supporting Russia, which they're not. And I think that's what gets missed. And the balance is just completely lacking. If I could just make one other point, you had me up against Dov last week, and he made a point that 98% of Jews are Zionists. That was plainly incorrect. I tried to get back in because you only had 3 minutes left. All the research is, in the UK, it's 65%. In America, it's as low as 37%. And even in Israel itself, the Jerusalem Post says it's only 90%. So there's just so much of this kind of misinformation that comes out, including from guest speakers of LBC.
Well, I think
balance is so lacking.
Oh, come on. I mean, I look, Dov has been on my programme many times, and he's a very passionate supporter of an Israeli state. And I think where you and he will disagree is possibly on your definitions of Zionism. To me, Zionism means that you support the right of a Jewish state to exist. Other people will extend that far more widely than that.
Agreed, yeah.
So, and I suspect that's what he was talking about, that figure of 98%, because it would be a bit odd if most Jews didn't actually believe that.
Yeah, fair point. I mean, I don't want to get sidetracked on that issue, but even the 98% figure using that definition, I couldn't find anywhere in all my research. There are many other figures, but certainly not 98%. But on that point about balance, I have to come back to my point. I've never voted apart from once in my life, and I'm now in my 40s, but I will be voting on this occasion because of the Gaza issue. And the reason I haven't voted in the past is it's a completely, I think, rational position and a logical position. And I actually heard a professor from Oxford University, I tried to find the name before I got on air, unfortunately I couldn't, and he said anyone that votes is the most irrational thing you can do because it actually makes no material difference to the outcome of not only a general election, for example, but even a local election. Now, I will vote in things like where we go for the Christmas party for lunch, because my vote could be decisive in a group of 10, 12, maybe even 20, 30 people. It could be decisive. And indeed, my vote last year for the Christmas lunch was decisive, and we ended up going where I wanted to go. But let's be honest, if I vote for Lib Dems, this time round, is it going to make a difference to which council?
Yeah, it could well do.
Won't.
No, it could well do.
The odds of that are lofty.
No, seriously. In quite a few seats in local elections, they are won by 1 or 2 votes. There have been ties in local elections. Sarah Pochin, the MP for Runcorn, won her by-election by 6 votes. So don't tell me that the 6 people who brought that about, their votes didn't count. They do count. Every vote counts.
In certain constituencies.
Yeah, but you don't know before you go and vote. I mean, people talk about safe seats. There's no such thing anymore.
Well, where I am, Lib Dem's going to wipe the floor of all the other parties, and I think there are certain seats where councillors are almost guaranteed to win.
Well, no, they're not. They only win because more people vote for them than the other candidates.
Ian, I could tell you right now who's going to win in Brent, which is where I live. I can tell you right now, and I'm willing to put £1,000 on it, to your charity of your choice if I'm wrong. In fact, I'll put £10,000 on it because I know who's going to win. Whether I vote or not makes no difference. And the same applies to the vast majority of the population. I accept your point that there will be some areas where it's very, very finely balanced in local elections. In general elections, there's very few number of seats where your vote is going to make a material difference.
Utterly wrong. Why is it that Labour have got a majority of over 400 as opposed to the previous result where the Conservatives had a majority of 80? It's because people turned out and voted in all sorts of different ways, which meant that Labour got a majority. Now, a lot of them didn't vote Labour. They voted Reform, which meant that Labour got in, and Lib Dems to an extent, through the back door because the Conservative vote declined. But don't tell me those votes didn't count.
I'm talking about a single individual vote, Ian. So
every vote is individual.
Yeah, and I'm saying an individual vote won't make a difference. That's my point. I'm not saying collective votes, right? You can't.
Well, the collective votes are a collection of individual votes.
I take your point, but the point that I'm trying to make to you, Ian, I'm perhaps not articulating it very well. If I go and vote on Thursday, it will not make a material difference to who the councillors are in Brent Council. And for 99% of your listeners, the vote that they make will not. Well, you can 99.999%. Their vote will not make a.
You phone me on Friday evening and tell me the result in your local area, and then I will find council areas where individual votes have made a difference, and we'll agree to have a score draw, shall we?
I listen to you so often. I'm pretty sure you don't work Fridays for me to call you.
This week I do though.
Right. I will call you on Friday. I expect preferential treatment to be best up.
I've booted Rachel Johnson out of her seat.
You're much better.
No. She's excellent, but she's actually on holiday, so I volunteered to do it. Jay, thank you very much indeed. Right, we'll come to more of your calls in a moment. We've had quite a spirited first couple of calls, haven't we? Let's continue that. But we're also going to talk about a couple of other issues too over the course of the next half an hour before Cross Question at 8. It's 7:32. News headlines with Amelia Cox.
The Chief Prosecutor for England and Wales says hate crime cases will be fast-tracked following a rise in anti-Semitic attacks. The announcement comes after the Prime Minister held a summit with community groups, police and government ministers to discuss tackling the issue. 4 Palestine Action activists have been found guilty of causing £1 million worth of damage to an Israeli defence firm in Bristol. The group destroyed equipment at the Elbit Systems factory in August 2024 in an attempt to shut it down. And detectives have revealed a woman who died in an explosion alongside a man in Bristol had reported someone forcing their way into her home. Avon and Somerset police say he was known to her and had an explosive device. They're treating her death as murder. LBC weather clearer in the east tonight with the odd shower for North Sea coasts. Isolated showers further west, lows of -1.
This is LBC.
Your life's already digital. From banking and shopping to streaming and learning. So why does sorting government stuff still feel like such hard work? The government is introducing a new digital ID to make access to services quicker and more secure for everyone. But we need to hear from you. Your voice matters. Search Digital ID Consultation to have your say. Digital ID, making public services work for you.
Want to watch something on the bus without strangers turning it into a free viewing party? Now you see it.
Now you don't. Keep your screen for your eyes only with built-in privacy display on the Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra. Save £336 when you buy at EE and claim a 14-inch Chromebook Go Wi-Fi worth £249. Better hurry, these deals won't wait around. Now you see it, now you don't. Combined offer ends 7th of May, saving over 24-month contract. Claim Chromebook from Samsung within 30 days. T's and C's apply.
At John Lewis Money, we know your home is more than an address. It's the sunlight pouring in. Well, sometimes. The coffee on tap and the best spot on the sofa. It's why our home insurance is thoughtfully designed with 3 levels of flexible cover for the home you've created. Because when you notice the details, you notice the difference. Search John Lewis Money. Terms and exclusions apply. John Lewis Finance Limited is authorised for insurance distribution and credit broking by the Financial Conduct Authority.
Iain Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
7:35 on LBC. Let's go to Brian in Fulham. Hello, Brian.
Hello. What I'd like to say, I very much agree with you about everybody should vote, because we're all responsible, whether we vote or not, for what governments we get.
Yep.
We have to take on board that responsibility, even though most of the world is based on a faulty governmental system of opposition and government.
Why is that a faulty system?
Because it's based on competition and power. It's not based on working out what is the best for the population.
Well, how do you do that without elections? You have a dictatorship.
No. I'm not sure. I don't have an immediate solution for that. But what we need to do is to work out ways of creating governments based much more on consensus rather than opposition.
Oh, dear. It's funny, I was watching a YouTube clip today of Margaret Thatcher where she was giving an interview, I think it was about 77 or 78, and she said, you know what, consensus, I've had enough of this. Consensus has got us into this position. We need a few more people with conviction. And I think she was absolutely right.
Well, I think you can have conviction about creating consensus.
Well, I suppose that theoretically that's possible. But what you're talking about is effectively a government of the people, by the great and the good, who people think know more about these things than they do. So a government of technocrats. We essentially have a government of technocrats at the moment, and I'm not sure that's working.
No, I'm definitely not talking about technocrats. I'm talking about people who have a genuine concern about the welfare of individuals and the whole population.
Well, any MP that comes into this studio would say that that's them.
Yes, of course, and most of them be lying through their teeth. That's just a statement. That's part of the corruption of politics. If there's any genuine empathy between the politician and the people that they want to elect them and they want to give a service to, then that's a different proposition.
Well, I mean, you're grossly generalising. I mean, of course, there are politicians who fall into the category that you've articulated there, but there are many, and look, I know a lot of politicians. I think most of them actually do believe that they're in it for the right reasons and they want to do good for the people.
Maybe that's what they believe, but the actual system that they're supposed to be working in creates division and hostility.
Yes, but the whole point of being a politician is that you put your arguments forward and then the other side argue against them and then the electorate decide who's right. That's the whole basis of a democracy, surely.
Yes, it is. And it fails to live up to the creation of a fellow feeling.
Save me from feelings.
Yeah, well, I can understand you say that, but...
well, I mean, look, the land does not flow with milk and honey. We don't all sit round a campfire and sing Kumbaya, my lord. I mean, life isn't like that. Life is real, and in a way, it's all our faults for electing the wrong people. And it's all our faults for people who complain all the time, which is what you're doing. But, I mean, have you ever stood for election? Well, maybe you don't believe in elections, so that's the reason that you haven't.
I vote, I do, yes. I haven't stood in an election.
Well, maybe you should, Brian.
Not in this sort of system. Can I tell you about my choice, what governs my choices for who I am going to vote?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, well, it starts off with Hannah Spencer was the Green Party's newest candidate, and she gave, when she won a recent election, she was so inspiring that I thought, I really like the values of the Green Party, and that they're for the planet.
Oh, are they? It's funny, they never mention it nowadays.
Well, that's because Jack Palahniuk is in charge, and I'm afraid he doesn't go with the true values of the Green Party, I think. The stuff he's talked about in terms of drugs and...
Well, I mean, he's talking far more about sort of foreign affairs, Iran, Gaza, than he ever does about the environment.
Well, yeah, I mean, he needs to have a good policy about the environment. Anyway, so I was keen to vote for the Green Party until he came in with his policies. And
so, who are you going to vote for?
Well, I think I'm going to vote for the Lib Dems. I couldn't vote for Labour because they've made such a mess of the country at the moment, and they're failing. And the Lib Dems seem to be the only ones who have an across-the-board set of policies.
Well, we've got 2 votes for the Lib Dems in the hour so far. Who'd have thought? Thank you very much indeed, Brian. Carl says, no local issues. Local government is a waste of time and effort beyond sending a message to the latest lame duck PM, time to go. Nobody cares about the tiny influence the boomer councillors have. Well, again, a gross generalisation. John is in Newham. Hello, John.
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
I just wanted to pick up on a point you made to a lady caller, female caller, I think she was the last female caller. You said that she couldn't be bothered to get off her backside and go and vote.
Well, I was making a what I thought was a possibly amusing assumption.
Yeah. No, I'm not. I'm not taking offence on her behalf. But you know, if you said that to me, I'd laugh. But I laugh on her behalf because I don't think people who do vote realise what the power of not voting is. And I think people quite often go and vote for the best of a bad bunch. And I sit there thinking at home in dread while the rest of my family, you know, trot off to the local election station or polling station. And I dread to think what choices they're making by choosing the best of a bad bunch, which isn't, you know, using the word best is really sort of demeaning to this point I'm making. I just think if people actually sat at home and said, you know what, none of what you're saying is going to fund or fuel reality or life, as you put it. You need to come up with better policies, a better manifesto. You need to cost what you're saying properly. You need to win the trust of the people back.
Okay, well stand yourself then, rather than wallowing in your sanctimony.
No, because there are people who are cut out for politics. There are people who are cut out for leadership. It's not fair for you to say, stand up and give up all of your life. Because I'm talking about real life, as you said. I'm talking about people who are able to talk to people, who are able to canvass, who are able to actually get off their backside, walk down the road.
Yeah. Well, you're an articulate guy. Why don't you do it?
Solve problems. Because I need a party to get behind. It's like saying, oh, if you think the doctor should do it.
Well, you've got at least 6 parties to choose from. I mean, surely there is one that you agree with more than another.
I would have voted for Green Party, and to be honest with you, I looked up what their manifesto was saying in our area where I'm from, whilst the other callers were on the phone, and quite frankly, it's laughable. I'd regret typing the blimmin' thing into my phone. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I do know what you mean on that front.
It is a mess. And
John,
I think
I've got...
would have stood up and told them to go back and do your homework, and we'll vote again next week. I don't believe we should be voting.
Will you forgive me? I've got a politician on the phone that I do need to talk to before we go to the next break. Thank you for a very spirited call. They've all been quite spirited in this hour, haven't they? Dr. David Bull joins me, Chairman of Reform UK. David, very good evening to you.
Good evening to you, Ian.
Now, let's start off with the expectations game, because let me put a theory to you. I think the Labour Party have been quite successful in this election campaign of trying to persuade us that it's all going to be a complete disaster, and that if they lose any fewer than 1,850 seats, it's actually going to be a Pyrrhic victory for them. Now, conversely,
that's a new one, Ian, to me. That's an absolutely new one, but carry on.
But conversely, I wonder whether the expectation for your party's performance has got too high, and if you don't win sort of a four-figure number of seats, people are going to say, oh, well, they flattered and deceived yet again.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point, actually. Look, I've been on the road for the last 10 months. I think we were the first party to start campaigning. I've seen 30,000 people across Scotland, Wales and England as well. And actually, it really doesn't matter where I go in the country. People are absolutely furious, sick and tired. They see no governance. They see a government in complete disarray. They are sick and tired, a little bit actually like your last caller was saying, which is that all politicians are terrible. Well, I don't buy that, actually, that we have 5,000 candidates. Many of these people have never stood before, but they are people who are angry, who believe in this country, who actually want to see something done. Now, just in terms of the expectation, you're right. Those polls are showing, some of them are showing that we would win something like 1,500 seats, new seats. But the point for us is that you've got to remember, we are only 4 years old. I was there at the founding of this party. We have had the most incredible rise, a meteoric rise, never seen before in British history. So in terms of if I'm a betting man, what would success look like to me as those results are unveiled? I think if we were to win anything, even just under 1,000 seats, would be absolutely fantastic. It would be amazing. Now, I am also very aware that you don't win any of those seats until voting ends at 10 o'clock on polling day. So we are still fighting for every single vote. And that means in England, in Scotland and in Wales. And that's the reason, actually, I started my tour 10 months ago in Scotland, because it's also absolutely vital that we're campaigning for the future of the union. And one other thing that I would say that's quite interesting is that when I go around the country and we start talking, these are local elections, remember, we're talking in England, we're talking about local issues, but it doesn't matter where I am, everyone is reverting to national issues. They see a rudderless Labour government that doesn't believe in anything, and that's why the slogan that we are campaigning on is vote reform and get Starmer out. And I haven't really met anyone who doesn't agree with that sentiment.
Well, which if it was a general election, I mean, a reasonable sentiment, but these are local elections in England. I mean, surely you've got to appeal to people on a local basis. And, yes, I mean, you look at the performance of one or two of your councils that were elected last year, and let's put it this way, it hasn't all been positive, has it?
Well, let's just look at Derbyshire, for example. So let's just go back, which is our councillors who were elected, many of them had no experience at all. And when you look at the quality and the calibre of candidates coming through now, they are absolutely brilliant. In Derbyshire, that 17,500 pothole mess that we inherited, we removed that backlog in months. When you look at the savings across our councils, we've identified £700 million in identified savings. And when you look at council tax increases, we have the lowest average council tax increase across all of the political parties. So I would argue that actually we're doing a good job. Can we improve? Of course we can. Okay. But that is also going to be a matter of experience and getting those councillors in, and that's why I want to win more seats.
Were you consulted about this policy that was announced over the last few days of putting migration detention centres in green constituencies?
Was I consulted, the chairman? The honest answer to that is we didn't have a conversation about it, but I think it's quite a good ruse in many ways. That it's certainly
a ruse. Should policies be ruses?
Well, look, the point is that Z is trying to make an important point, which is under Operation Restoring Justice, where you've got this illegal migration catastrophe, we will detain people and deport people. So the point is we have to have detention centres, and we are drawing attention to the fact that the Green Party is trying to purport itself as being green and cuddly and basically wanting to save the environment. That could not be further from the truth. This is a nasty, uber left-wing party that believes in not having any national borders. Anyone from anywhere can come here. And actually, the reality is quite the contrary. But the fact is that what we're going to have to do is keep people where they are basically housed, where we will then process their claims and they will then be removed from this country unless they have a right to be in this country.
But you said the Green Party are a nasty party. That we can debate that. But surely this policy doesn't show reform in the greatest light because it's a vengeful policy. It's a nasty policy.
Well, not really. No, if you come here illegally, you'll be detained and you'll be deported. If you come back again, then you will.
I'm not arguing about that. I'm saying that putting these detention centres prior to deportation, just in areas that are controlled by the Green Party, has a smack of nastiness about it.
Well, they have to go somewhere, don't they?
Well, they do, absolutely. But why in what you have said is that, or what Zia Youssef said in this video that he put out, which he filmed on Brighton Beach, I mean, quite an impressive propaganda video in many ways. But he said, well, if you vote reform and you elect reform councillors and MPs, we won't be putting these detention centres in your area. I mean, that is tantamount to electoral bribery.
I think what he's doing is he's focusing people's minds on what you vote for when you vote for the Green Party. The fact is what you're voting for is open borders. You are voting for people to come here where we house them, where we pay for them. And that is not what the British people want.
And that's fine. That's a perfectly reasonable argument to make. But to just say we're going to put these in green areas, I think a lot of people will look at that and think that's not a serious policy.
I think people will look at that, and people are looking at it and talking about it. And that is the point of that particular policy, which is to draw attention to the difference between the Green Party and with us in Reform UK. And also, I would just say that when we look at other countries as well, just in Wales and in Scotland, if we had had this conversation 4 years ago, where we are in it to win it in Wales, you would have thought I was absolutely balmy. And the fact that we're a viable opposition in Scotland, you again would have said you are absolutely balmy. We have come on leaps and bounds, and that is why these elections are so important.
And you are correct in both of those assumptions. I would have been completely wrong. But final question. Nigel Farage didn't appear with Laura Kuenssberg on Sunday, which I thought was a strange thing, given that it's the week before these elections, very important elections. People are saying he's frit because of the accusations about this £5 million donation which he received. Mean? Well, it's a Lincolnshire term for frightened. You should know that, being a Thatcher fan, David. she used that against Dennis Healey in the '83 election, I think. Anyway, why won't Nigel do interviews? Is he scared of being asked about this donation?
That's hilarious. Nigel's done more public appearances and interviews than the other leaders put together. I don't know why he didn't do Laura's show. I don't manage his diary. I'm busy doing my own diary, so you'll have to ask him.
Are you comfortable with that donation?
Well, so I don't know about the donation itself, but it was certainly for his security, and it was given before he became a Member of Parliament. And he, as far as I'm aware, he has not broken any law or electoral law.
David, thank you very much indeed. That's Dr. David Bull, Chairman of Reform UK. Right, we are going to convene the cross-question panel at 8 o'clock, so only 8 minutes to go. Danny Beales will be with me, Labour MP, Munira Wilson, Lib Dem MP, Sean Berry, Green MP, and Steve Baker, former Conservative MP. We're waiting for your questions on that. It's 7:52.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
You know how importantly we deal with the issue of online safety here at LBC. I've been privileged to speak with Ellen Room. I remind you she lost her 14-year-old son. Although it's for all the wrong reasons, it's good to see you now at last in the studio, Ellen. Thank you for coming by. And joining you is a fellow campaigner, Lauren Cowell. I remember speaking one time when you were at number 10 Downing Street, and I was struck by the fact that the Prime Minister declined to meet you.
I really want to get our stories across. As a group of bereaved parents, we've got a whole range of stories about whether the children were groomed online, whether they've dealt with a challenge, and and just actually, these are real children. This is really happening.
Lauren, what do you make of the fact that the PM hasn't met with your friend and others?
It is very disappointing. I mean, that's putting it mildly. I think they deserve to be heard.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
For whoever they want to be in life, give them a great start with Well Kid. Carefully balanced, great-tasting vitamins and minerals for 4 to 12-year-olds with specific nutrients such as zinc and vitamin D, which support normal immune system function. The Well Kid range from Vitabiotics, from Boots, pharmacies and vitabiotics.com.
May we have your attention? Introducing the Volkswagen May event. Get an extra £1,000 towards your finance deposit with Solutions PCP 7.9% APR representative across the range, including the amazing Golf, Tiguan, and all-electric ID3. Major. I said it was in May, right?
Yes.
Ends Monday, the 18th of May. Visit your nearest Volkswagen retailer. You may just find the car you've been looking for.
Stop it.
Participating retailers. Excludes T-Roc ID bars and Golf GTI 50. ID3 from stock only. Indemnities may be required. Registered by 30th of August. Volkswagen Finance.
Switching to Vodafone full fibre broadband is now as easy as pie. Oh, freshly baked. It's a walk in the park. Hello, little fella. It's like taking candy from a baby. Come on, as if I'd do that. With One Touch Switch, it's easy. We sort everything out for you. We even contact your current provider. Plus, we'll help towards leaving fees. Switch today to full fibre broadband with Vodafone.
Up to £200 credit to cover leaving fees. More information and terms at vodafone.co.uk/broadband.
At John Lewis Money, we know your home is more than an address. It's the sunlight pouring in. Well, sometimes. The coffee on tap and the best spot on the sofa. It's why our home insurance is thoughtfully designed with 3 levels of flexible cover for the home you've created. Because when you notice the details, you notice the difference. Search John Lewis Money. Terms and exclusions apply. John Lewis Finance Limited is authorised for insurance distribution and credit broking by the Financial Conduct Authority.
This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
7:55. Brian says, Ian, are you on the Global Player tonight? Yes, we are, both in video and audio. And if you want to watch us, you can watch us on the LBC app and the LBC YouTube channel. And why wouldn't you? Because we have Fraser Knight with us to talk about the fact that he's been with the Director of Public Prosecutions today.
I have indeed. Continuing the conversation, of course, of the threats that the Jewish community is facing, Ian. This afternoon, Stephen Parkinson, who's the most senior prosecutor in England and Wales, he's issued new guidance to prosecutors when it comes to reports of anti-Semitism and of other hate crimes. And what he's told them, almost in the same vein as we saw in the 2024 riots, is that they need to make quick decisions. They need to decide very quickly whether or not to charge someone when that case comes from police to the Crown Prosecution Service. And it's all about sending really a clear message that hate crime is not tolerated here. And it's because, he says, they are seeing an unprecedented number, and we don't use that word lightly. He is saying that this is unprecedented number of anti-Semitic attacks that are happening every single day, he says, right across the country. And he says swift, robust and effective action is needed to prevent these daily attacks on Jewish people becoming normalised. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that police perhaps don't need to gather all of the evidence before the decision is made to charge someone. It doesn't mean they won't gather it at all. It just means that they can charge someone much earlier in the process. And when I sat down with Stephen Parkinson, this is what he told me.
All prosecutors want to present the best possible case to the court, and that often involves asking more evidence than is needed in order to make a decision. And for all sorts of reasons, including the fact that once the police have referred a case to us, they want to move on to other things, that might make sense. But in this instance, what makes sense is to take swift action. And I know the police are with us on this. So, for instance, if there's a piece of evidence that will just tip the case over the line, but you're not quite there, then I'm saying to prosecutors, speak to the police, establish whether they can get hold of it quickly, and if you're satisfied that they can, make that decision, record it, set a timetable to the police in order to deliver the missing link, but don't delay. That is different to the way we normally go about things, but we're at a point of significant crisis, I think, for the Jewish community. The community needs to see that we're stepping up.
Stephen Parkinson told me that he's heard of families being targeted on their way to school, people shouting things at them like genocide, and he says that is a crime and it will be prosecuted. This new guidance, Iain, could mean that we're about to see a lot more charges coming.
Well, Gordon has just texted in to say, I drove through Golders Green this evening and saw actual bobbies on the beat. Great to see. Well, that is good to see, Gordon, and thanks for that. Fraser, thank you very much indeed for telling us all about your meetings with the DPP. Right, coming up in the next hour, and by the way, apologies to all of those calls that I didn't get through in this hour. We might do something, well, vaguely along the same lines tomorrow night, so we'll see if we can get more of you on. Right, we have with us on Cross Question Danny Beales, Labour MP for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, Munira Wilson, Liberal Democrat Education Spokesperson and MP for Twickenham, Sian Berry, Green Party MP for Brighton Pavilion, and Steve Baker, former Conservative MP and Minister. They're here to take your calls on 0345 6060 973. You can, of course, WhatsApp your question on that number, text 84850, and as I said a few moments ago, you can watch us on Global Player, the LBC app, and the LBC YouTube channel.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, prosecutors are being told to fast-track suspected hate crimes in response to a rise in anti-Semitic attacks in the UK. Director of Public Prosecution Stephen Parkinson has told LBC he wants them to act as quickly as possible.
I'm requiring prosecutors to make immediate decisions wherever they can and where the core evidence is there, which enables them to meet the threshold for prosecution.
Earlier, the Prime Minister said he won't tolerate attempts by foreign states to stir up hatred and violence. Sir Keir Starmer held a summit on anti-Semitism involving community groups, ministers and police chiefs. 4 Palestinian action activists have been found guilty of criminal damage at an Israeli-linked defence firm's UK site. It's estimated the group caused £1 million worth of damage. Plans are being made to get Britain stuck on board a cruise ship in the Atlantic Ocean home. 3 people have died following a suspected hantavirus outbreak. A British passenger is also in a critical but stable condition in hospital in South Africa. And Nissan's to combine 2 production lines into one at its Sunderland factory. The car makers also announced 900 jobs are going across Europe. In the city, the FTSE 100's closed down 144 points at 10,219. The pound buys $1.35 and €1.15. LBC weather clearer in the east tonight with the odd shower for North Sea coasts, isolated showers further west, lows of -1. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
I've looked after my kids since they were born. Now they've got kids. I still want to look after them. I don't want them struggling to make decisions about my money or my health if I can't. So we made a lasting power of attorney. Now, if I can't speak for myself, they'll speak for me. It's a weight off for all of us, isn't it?
Yes, Mum. Lasting power of attorney. Search your voice, your decision.
You probably think you're pretty good at multitasking behind the wheel. I mean, you have to multitask to drive. So what's wrong with checking your phone? The thing is, your brain simply doesn't work. Even a quick look at the message, for quick reply, affects your concentration and makes you less able to react to hazards. If you use a mobile phone while driving, you're 4 times more likely to crash. Think. Put your phone away.
This is LBC from Global. Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening and welcome to Cross Question. It's 3 minutes past 8. Joining me on the panel tonight, we have Munira Wilson, Liberal Democrat Education Spokesperson and MP for Twickenham. Sitting next to her is Steve Baker, former Conservative MP and Minister. To my right, Sian Berry, Green Party MP for Brighton Pavilion, former Green Party leader. And next to her, Danny Beales, Labour MP for Uxbridge and South Ruislip. They are here to answer your questions. The number to call 0345 6060 60973. You can WhatsApp us on that number. You can text 84850. And if you're not watching us on Global Player, the LBC app, or the LBC YouTube channel, I want to know why.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross question. Watch live on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Right, let's start with our first question. It's a WhatsApp question from Robbie in Chelmsford. Should politicians not come together to address rising anti-Semitism and hate rather than trying to weaponise it for political gain? Steve Baker.
Yes, they absolutely should. I mean, I think when it's fundamentally a matter of decency, people should come together. And particularly when people have been killed, I think it's absolutely imperative that they do. Of course, it is a bit difficult to do that when various stupid things get done or shared on X, and I'm going to, in the spirit of the question, not rehearse what's happened. But absolutely, every politician should just unite and say no to violence and hate, yes.
Munira?
Yeah, I think you're going to end up with some level of unanimity on this panel. Look, I was on the BBC on a panel at lunchtime today with a Conservative and a Labour MP, and we all agreed that we needed to take action, both in terms of security, but actually what many Jews say when I talk to them is we don't want higher walls, and our schools and synagogues and community centres shouldn't have to be fortresses. And what we want, and I welcome to the summit today, and let's hope action follows swiftly after that, but what they want is action around whether that's interfaith dialogue, community cohesion, better education, but also prescription of groups like the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. And I'm really pleased that both Labour and the Conservatives have now agreed that they should be prescribed, and I hope that this government will crack on and bring forward emergency legislation.
Because to be fair, the Liberal Democrats have always said that.
Yes, and I was trying not to make that political point, again, in the spirit of the question.
Well, unusually, I've done it for you.
Thank you. But it has been we've been making that point for a few years, and both the previous Conservative government resisted, and although the Labour government has said that it wants to do that and is prepared to do that, it hasn't taken action, but I'm glad that will now happen swiftly.
Sean?
I mean, I absolutely agree. And I think the Prime Minister today has been very good. He has he's brought people together, and he's talked about the wider issues in society, the role of social media. And I think that's really, really important. The fever pitch things have been getting to, particularly around elections, it doesn't feel good to me. I've talked about reducing the temperature, the fact that everyone in leadership positions needs to get people to come together. We as parties, we're all not extremists. We're all part of representing people. There's a grown-up attitude to be taken here, which is that we are all on the same side, and we can build an anti-racist consensus and really influence the things that were talked about today in terms of prevention and education. We can all take part in that, and working together is the way forwards. And the division that's going on, the weaponisation, I feel like it's unhealthy for our democracy as well as for our society.
I mean, if I were to read between the lines there, are you sending a message to your leader on that? Because, I mean, you mentioned social media. Well, he's come under a lot of criticism for what he did on social media.
He's apologised for that.
Well, and then took back the apology.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't at all. There are questions we have to ask of the police in the right forums, and he apologised sincerely for putting that on social media, and that's the right attitude. And I think, I say, the Prime Minister today was much more moderate and much more practical about the work we need to do together, and I hope we can all agree on that today.
But and I'm not really trying to make a party political point here, but your predecessor as Green Party leader, Caroline Lucas, she has made an intervention in this debate today, effectively. Well, you don't have to read between the lines too much to interpret what she said. It was a bit of a sort of shot over the bows.
I don't agree with that. It's been characterised wrongly. It's what we're all saying in public and in private. It is very important that action is taken by all of us, and that we call out anti-Semitism and racism when it happens, and that we take action. That is what the Green Party is doing, and I don't think it can be characterised that way in terms of what Caroline said.
Danny Beales.
Well, I mean, I agree completely with the general sentiment of what's been said here by everyone. We do need to work cross-party. We do need to stand together across society, across all sorts of groups and backgrounds to call this out for what it is, abhorrent anti-Semitism taking place in our country in 2026. And it requires action, a number of which have been talked about, and I agree fully with Munira. We need to prescribe the IRGCI, and other MPs have been saying that for some time in Parliament, and we need to get on and do that. We need today, the Prime Minister convened talks about this issue, outlining a number of actions across media, on the online world, education, and all of those are right, as well as the extra funding for policing. But as Munira said, and I've heard from Jewish people in my own constituency, Jewish people should not have to live behind walls and gates with security cameras. That is a failure in and of itself, and we have to take action on that. But what I would just clarify one thing is that we can't put our fingers in our ears, and when politicians say things which are anti-Semitic, we can't ignore that. That's part of the problem. That is the problem. And I've known Sian for 15 years when we were councillors together in Camden, and I respect Sian a lot.
You've seen me taking a strong stand on this.
And that's why I'm surprised, because if this was happening in my party, and it has happened in my party, I stood up and called it out for what it was and said that the leadership had to act or it had to change. And I must say, I've been absolutely appalled in recent days. These aren't just comments. These are anti-Semitism. Plain and simple, to talk about ramming synagogues being revenge, not anti-Semitism.
Yeah, we've been horrified, and we're taking it.
But I don't think, I'm not
in the
kidding,
same
what
way
action has
as
been
any
taken.
party.
Candidates are still in place, or they're still campaigning. 2 people have been arrested, and I would just clarify that the leadership, I don't think, has been strong enough on this from the Green leader, and I do welcome some of the contributions from former leaders today. But a terrorist incident has happened. And that's the moment to be questioning the actions of the police, who are dealing with, a terrorist with a knife in his hand, saying that the police somehow should be questioned about that. I'm sorry, this is just bonkers, actually, from the leadership of the Green Party, and it's appalling.
I don't like the way that descended. I think it is unfair. We do need to be lowering the temperature here, and I don't think it's very constructive to be continually going back on something that Zach has apologised for.
It wasn't really an apology, Sian. It was a non-apology apology. It really was.
Iain, I think Danny, if I may say so, has very definitely made the counterpoint to the question. I think that the issue, by making the point that Labour's dealt with it, and Keir Starmer made a good statement today, I thought, and he has dealt with anti-Semitism himself. But this is at the heart of the issue, and to the questioner's point, I think the reason that politicians have to call out anti-Semitism when it can be seen amongst political parties is not really to make a partisan point, it's just to insist the leaders of our nation may not engage in this. And so that puts people like me in a difficult position, because whereas I represented an extremely diverse constituency, well, what you want to call things out, but you don't want to be seen to be being merely partisan. And so that's partly why I deliberately left it to Danny to make the point that
I'm sure he was very grateful.
Because what's the point me going into a knockabout? I remember going to Holocaust Memorial Day debates and watching various prominent Labour MPs standing up, of course, facing the Conservatives and condemning anti-Semitism in political parties. And I was looking around thinking, why does he think we're anti-Semites? Of course he didn't. He was thinking about his own party. And so it's tricky, to the questioner's point of view. We need to call things out, but try to do it in a way which doesn't take partisan advantage, so that we've actually united on it. And that's why I think it is really damaging when politicians tweet things they ought not.
Chris has got a follow-up question on this. He says, could you ask your panel if blaming social media is an easy answer when traditional media and MPs should take most responsibility? I cannot believe the majority of the UK population get their information just from social media. MPs are employed to create rules and laws. And just to add something into that, I was completely horrified today when I heard that a survey of many students showed that 1 in 5 students would not want to share student accommodation with a Jewish student. And those would be the very people that would have a go at reform if a reform candidate said something that was sort of say, I wouldn't want to share student accommodation with a black person. They would be rightfully horrified by that. How can this be?
So to the questioner's point about social media, I think the thing about social media, I've learned more about this since I stood down and started working with Labour voting, Remain voting, Professor Paul Dolan. Social media liberates 2 phenomena in behaviour. One is we've all got a fast brain and a slow brain. So on social media, you tend to get out and you get the quick brain, intuitive brain reaction rather than the more thoughtful response you might have got. And the second thing is we've all got a thing called the amygdala. And when we feel, as it were, triggered and our blood rises, that's the amygdala discharging hormones, and then we're angry. And social media, again, allows you to cane out something while you're still angry. And I think to the questioner's point, that's the thing about social media, which you didn't get when someone had to put pen to paper. And it has transformed the way we communicate.
You just had to decide whether to use green ink or not. Danny, sorry.
I mean, I think social media is part of the problem. It's not the whole problem. And these conversations are happening in community spaces, in homes, as ever been the case around anti-Semitism. It's pervasive and it takes all forms, and traditional media. But there is something to be said about the role of social media and how it's radicalising people on all parts of the political spectrum. And I see it in my own constituency. And I think part of the issue we have is, when we maybe believe something, social media just confirms what we think. The algorithms are there to send us more and more content, which just confirms our beliefs or our prejudices. Whereas other forms of media have often been perhaps more balanced, have presented different views and different voices. And so I see it often on all sorts of issues, on anti-Semitism, but also actually on Islamophobia in my constituency. And I've seen instances of both recently. I've had a mosque attacked with a pig thrown at a mosque that I've had to respond to and go and support. And I've also had, unfortunately, a Green Party candidate going around saying I'm paid by Israel, and all sorts of other things happening.
I get that every day.
And so I think this is a problem. It needs tackling through all forms. I think the Prime Minister's commitment today to look at social media is right, but also look at universities, look at public spaces, the NHS, look at the Culture, Media and Sport Department. I think we can't just be complacent that somehow throwing this to YouTube is the solution.
Chris's point that you put to us was, shouldn't MPs be doing more? And I think there has been a big gap in government policy. We've got active radicalisation happening on social media. It isn't just people being angry. There are concerted efforts to push content out, and particularly on X since Elon Musk took over. He has signed up to some of the most anti-Semitic, most racist ideologies, and he has changed the way that X works to allow this not only to proliferate, to radicalise people in societies right across the world. He's allowed active racists and anti-Semites to monetize their opinions through those algorithms. And the government so far, despite recommendations from people like the Metropolitan Police, has taken no real action. And I think I'm the only person in this room today who's actually abandoned X because of how disgusting it has become. It is really important that the government takes a stronger stand against that platform in particular, but also Meta, who's done an awful lot to weaken its controls and its action that it takes against outright racism and radicalisation that falls short of hate speech, because our hate speech laws have quite a high bar. This needs sorting out by the government, and I didn't hear any clear commitments on this from them today. And they've gone shy of taking action against these enormous social media giants in things that they've done, like the online safety apps.
I don't think that's fair. The government has taken action on Grok with the nudification app using the online safety powers.
In particular aspects,
the government has taken some action, but I agree more is needed, and I welcome that.
Okay, Munira?
I agree with a lot of what's been said. I mean, the problem with platforms like X is they amplify stuff so quickly, and all sorts of insidious, terrible, inflammatory things can explode within seconds around the world. And I have to say, I've now taken to, sometimes when I see images on there when someone's making a political point, I stop and I check with people. I was like, do you think that's real? I don't want to comment on this, because you're not sure now anymore what's real or what's not.
Well, I had that this afternoon when one of my followers who interacts with you quite a lot, he posted a picture of this supposed letter that Labour backbenchers are going to send to the General Secretary of the Labour Party. And I was thinking, is that real or is it not?
Get off X, everybody.
No, you see, I think you're completely wrong
anymore.
On that.
It needs to.
If people like you get off X, you just leave it to
you change.
You run away from the fight.
I mean, I've abandoned.
I disagree.
I've abandoned X a couple of times to Parler and to Blue Sky, but there's no point abandoning X. That's where. Well, that's it. So that's the thing, isn't it? And I would say stay on X and keep the centre of mass more where you would like it to be. But I have to say, I'm a member of the Free Speech Union, and I think that free speech is an absolute safeguard of a free society and is in all of our interests to preserve. And I think when we're having this conversation, we have to remember that in a free society, we should be tolerant. What does tolerant mean? It means agreeing to disagree. It doesn't mean that we all share in the same consensus. So we just have to be extremely careful where we draw the line about what is and isn't acceptable. So, because I think once we start policing thought, we start enforcing taboos, and then we go down the road to a closed society where some thoughts are unacceptable.
Okay, well, the next question after the break is on freedom of speech, or actually freedom of protest. We'll come on to that in a couple of minutes' time. You're listening to Cross Question on LBC. It's 18 minutes past 8.
LBC.
Go all Irish to France with great low prices. With Irish Ferries, you can for less. Irish Ferries, see you travel differently. T's and C's apply.
Is your cat drinking enough? Discover Purina One Hydrolife and help support their daily hydration with a taste they'll enjoy. Purina One Hydrolife. Make it easy.
What's the best present you ever got for your birthday? I bet it wasn't as life-changing as £1 million. Every week with the birthday draw, there's £1 million to be won. And you can enter from as little as £1 or via post. Enter by midnight on Sunday and your special day could win you £1 million. Visit thebirthdaydraw.com. Is it your lucky day? From Global and ITV. 18 plus, UK only, no purchase necessary.
There's one green bottle sat on my fridge shelf. This green and white bottle that supports my gut health. Beautiful by nature, beautiful by name. It's the tastiest way to up my gut health game.
Beautiful Gut Health. Switch your yogurt to the UK's #1 kefir and give your gut and your summer a lift. Kefir is a source of calcium which contributes to the normal function of digestive enzymes. For verification of UK's #1 kefir, see beautifulguthealth.com/radio.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
20 past 8 on LBC. We have Labour MP Danny Beales with us, Munira Wilson for the Liberal Democrats, Sian Berry for the Greens, and Steve Baker. Well, I say for the Conservatives. You're not currently a Conservative MP, but...
well, I'm not an MP, but last time I spoke to CCHQ, they were quite firm with me that I represent the Conservative Party when I come out. I think they were hoping to constrain what I say. It's never worked in the past. It's never worked in the past. It won't work in the future.
Indeed.
But I am very content to be thought a representative of the Conservative Party.
OK, well, let's talk to Khalid in Leicester. Khalid, what would you like to ask? Hi.
Hi. The question is that does the panel think that when people are protesting against the killing of innocents, the murder of innocents, the ethnic cleansing of innocents, and then the very same protest should be banned? Does it make sense that when on the one side people are being massacred and then the people protesting, they're the ones who should be banned? Is this not diabolical?
OK, well, Keir Starmer has called for the police to take tougher action against those chanting anti-Semitic slogans while attending pro-Palestine marches, while the Prime Minister also didn't rule out potentially outlawing certain marches altogether over this issue. Danny, let's start with you.
Well, I think both things can be true. I think it's right and it's important that people have a right to protest and demonstrate. And I often get this: why are protests being stopped? Well, they don't seem to be stopped to me. I mean, I have like we all do, an office in Parliament. Every single day, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 protests about all sorts of issues, including the situation in Palestine. And rightly so, people can demonstrate and share their views in a peaceful way. But there is a line where protests becomes hate speech, where it becomes inciting violence, or where it becomes more than just that. And I think we have seen instances where that is happening, and that is also wrong. And in light of what we're hearing about increasing anti-Semitism, about violence and radicalisation, attacks of all sorts on Jewish communities in London, I think it's also right that needs to be dealt with by the police, and they need appropriate powers to do that. Some of the slogans, some of the banners are not about protest, are not about democratic change. They're calling for violence. Globalised the Intifada, for instance, and others are not acceptable on the streets of London, a multi-faith and diverse city that I have called home. So I think both things can be true. We need to ensure that there is appropriate action taken when the line is crossed, but also preserve the right for free speech and for demonstration.
But where do you draw the line? Because all of us sitting around this table would probably draw the line in different places for whether a protest should be banned or not. There's another Unite the Kingdom rally, I think, on the 16th of May. Now, from all the evidence I've seen, the one that happened last year, it's been described as the Tommy Robinson rally. I think it's much wider than that. But I don't recall seeing any violent scenes on that last year. But then there are plenty of people who say, well, if we ban the pro-Palestine marches, we should ban that too.
Well, as far as I'm aware, people are not saying ban all marches. They're saying that action needs to be taken where people quite clearly are crossing the line. And that applies to any form of protest. I've had violent protests in my own constituency outside asylum hotels where police have been attacked. That is clearly not acceptable, and it needs action from the far right. But I don't think we can have an unlimited right to protest and say whatever we want, even when it incites violence and hatred and anti-Semitism or Islamophobia for that matter. So these are delicate issues. We live in a free society, and I completely agree. The line is not black and white, and it needs democratic discussion. It needs careful policing. But we can't just accept that, well, because we're a democracy, anything goes, because we're seeing the impacts of that. We're seeing radicalisation. We're seeing hate. We're seeing Jewish people not feeling safe to go about the street wearing their religious items of clothing or jewellery. That's not the sort of city I want to live in. And that requires tough decisions and it requires action.
Sean Berry.
I think the police and the government have spoken about this in quite moderate ways, and they do have the powers they currently need. We are seeing people in context who say things like globalise the intifada, who are being arrested. We are seeing hate speech tackled within marches, and it's obvious when a demonstration is in fact a targeted harassment against, for example, asylum seeker accommodation, that is a different thing. You can't just call anything a protest than the marches that go on. And I'm not even been calling for the Tommy Robinson marches to be banned, but I have wanted to see really clear policing of hate speech. And there is a question. We need to debate this in a very in a non-reactive way, in ways that are resilient to free speech in the future, as well as making sure that there isn't hate speech. And the last march that Tommy Robinson organised involved, and I'm going to mention Elon Musk again, because he came on a screen from America and said some things that were very, very close to inciting violence. He said, you either fight back or you die, in the context of an anti-migrant
Penny Morgan said that at a Conservative
march.
Conference. I don't think that's...
He was saying it not in a rhetorical way. Can I put it that way? It was dangerous speech. It was called dangerous and inflammatory by Downing Street afterwards. And the question of whether you can hold organisers responsible for things that individuals say that cross the line into hate speech is what we're talking about here. Whether you can ban a whole march because of the risk of that kind of hate speech,
but you can,
or whether you arrest the people who are doing the hate speech.
If you said
if they're in America, these are good questions, and we should be debating.
But if you said something hateful into that microphone now, I would be held responsible for it. Global would be held responsible for it, and there would no doubt be Ofcom complaints about it.
There wouldn't be criminal sanctions, though, or the banning of your organisation.
We'd certainly get a fine for allowing it to go out on air.
Yeah, and I think that is so. This is the question.
But you're not a hateful person, so you're not going to do
ban
it.
Marches. There's a very high bar for that, and I think the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister have said this. So yeah, I want to talk about hate on the streets, but I want to make sure that we don't go too far. Banning protests is a step too far for me.
I think Danny was saying it can't be that anything goes. I don't think anyone is suggesting that anything goes. There are politicians who are out there saying that we should be banning these protests. Look, protest and free speech is a cornerstone of our democracy, but absolutely anything does not go. And what we should be doing is policing the hateful elements and aspects of these marches. Some of that is very obvious from the placards and the chants that we know. Some is less obvious, and that's where I think equipping, training and resourcing our police officers to know when they need to step in and act is the right way forward. And also, there are powers there already for marches to be banned based on intelligence. And none of us are privy to the intelligence that the Met Police might have about a particular forthcoming march. And if the intelligence suggests that it shouldn't go ahead, then that's an operational decision for the Met, and they have the power to do that. But
we live in a society where a lot of people wouldn't even trust the Met with that kind of evidence. They'd say, well, they've just made it up because they don't want the march to happen. That is the sort of suspicious society that we live in nowadays.
Yes, there's an issue of culture to do with the culture of the Met and a lack of trust. But I think all my dealings with the Met have been very, very positive as an MP, and I think I'm sure Sir Mark Rowley will make the right decision on this. But I'm uncomfortable at the idea that we just sort of have some sort of blanket ban on marches. What we've got to do is police the hateful elements of these. And as Sian says, there is the legislation there in place, and people who are chanting these awful chants like Globalise Intifada are being arrested and action is being taken.
But they weren't a year or two ago, were they? That's the problem, in that you had people on these marches saying overtly anti-Semitic things, talking about gassing the Jews and all the rest of it, and they were just allowed on their way.
Okay, well, that's wrong. The action should have been taken on that sooner. And if I were a Jew, I would feel very uncomfortable going into town when those marches are on, in the same way that as a brown person, I felt very uncomfortable at going into town when the Tommy Robinson marches, whatever they're called, when that was on last year. And if it goes ahead this year, I probably wouldn't go anywhere close to it.
There were actually non-white people there. I've seen the videos.
I'm sure there were, but some of the chants that I heard and saw from the footage made it very, very uncomfortable for someone who looks like me.
3 very quick points. First, the policy and conduct of the State of Israel can never be used as an excuse for violence against British Jews. And I think sometimes, we can agree that, but I do think it needs saying over and again.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, I think it was Khalid's point, I absolutely recognise what he said as somebody who for 14 years represented a community that was 1 in 5 British Muslims. I do not doubt that the Muslims of my acquaintance who were going on these marches felt, as Khalid does, that he's protesting the slaughter of innocents. And I wish to protect the right of people to go out in good faith with a kind heart to say, hang on, some of the conduct of the State of Israel is not acceptable. The problem that Khalid has got, and I've got as somebody, I think my last rebellion was to defend Steve Bray, the pro-EU protesters' right to make a lot of noise.
Of studio now.
It was, because I thought he should be allowed to continue to be a particular nuisance to me and probably above most people. But how we police protest is such a sensitive point. We're in danger of radically agreeing with one another. I think the line absolutely gets crossed when people are inciting violence and there is a reasonable prospect of that violence coming to fruition. And since we are now plainly where we are, anyone chanting from the river to the sea really must know what they're calling for. Anyone talking about globalising the Intifada really ought to know they're calling for murder. And those people should be prosecuted. It is incitement. I think we have laws to deal with it. And, policing's hard, and I don't wish to be too critical of the police, but, choices. And, everybody now is mobilising against anti-Semitism, and that is a good thing. But it does require the police, when somebody chants something which is seen to inspire violence, to arrest them.
Right, more questions to come. 0345 6060 973. It's 8:31 on LBC. Daryl Jackson has the news headlines.
Prosecutors in England and Wales have been told to fast-track suspected hate crimes through the courts. It follows a recent spate of anti-Semitism attacks which have sparked a summit in Downing Street involving community groups, politicians and police chiefs. The US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said the operation to free stranded ships from the Strait of Hormuz is a defensive one. The crucial shipping route has been blocked by Iran since the start of the war. And Nissan has revealed plans to close a production line at its factory in Sunderland. The car maker will also cut 900 jobs in Europe, but it's not clear if any of those will be in the UK. LBC weather clearer in the east tonight with the odd shower for North Sea coasts. Isolated showers further west, lows of -1.
LBC.
There's one green bottle sat on my fridge shelf. This green and white bottle that supports my gut health. Beautiful by nature, beautiful by name. It's the tastiest way to up my gut health game.
Biotiful Gut Health. Switch your yogurt to the UK's #1 kefir and give your gut and your summer a lift. Kefir is a source of calcium which contributes to the normal function of digestive enzymes. For verification of UK's #1 kefir, see biotifulguthealth.com/radio.
How does it feel to face the storm head on? Go beyond the map. Drive into the extreme. Or win a Ford Explorer. Test drive one before the end of May and you could win one. Now how would that feel? Search Win a Ford Explorer. Ready, set, Ford. T's and C's apply. 25 plus only. See ford.co.uk for details.
Hey, Marcus Waring here. Cooking a balanced meal is my forte. But did you know most of us aren't getting enough omega-3 in our diets? Life often gets in the way. So I top up with 7C's Omega-3 Max Strength. It helps support my heart, brain and vision so I can keep doing what I love. 7C's Omega-3. Keep doing what you love.
Daily 250 milligrams EPA and DHA supports normal heart function. Daily 250 milligrams DHA supports normal brain function and vision. NDNS 2019-23.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
8:33. Labour MP Danny Beales is here. Munira Wilson for the Liberal Democrats, Sean Berry for the Greens and Steve Baker for the Conservatives. Right, Mark in Cardiff says, did the reaction from all the other parties to Reform's vow to put migrant detention centres in green voting areas show them all up to be NIMBY types in the end? Well, Sean, let's come to you first on this. Seeing as though Zia Youssef announced this policy in a video made on Brighton Beach and basically said you're going to cop it.
He was on Brighton Beach, but not in my constituency. Somehow seems to have failed to look up where the boundaries are. This isn't a policy. This is a stunt. And it absolutely shows how unserious, how reactionary, how thin-skinned Reform are, because we are the people who are doing the most to stand up to their programme, to defend migrants. This is a horrific policy. And I think the idea that they're trying to stimulate a NIMBY response, we are against having these migrant detention centres, these horrific policies towards migrants, full stop. We don't want them anywhere in the country, and we will keep saying that, and we will keep standing up against that, because in many parts of the country it's Green versus Reform. We showed that in Gorton and Denton, that Greens are the choice people make when they're trying to say no to Reform's racism, and when they're trying to say that they don't want
it's a bit difficult to accuse them of being racist when Zia Youssef is a Muslim himself. Zia Youssef, the Home Affairs spokesperson, is a Muslim himself. And the architect of this policy.
I don't know how long it would take before he was one of the people they were trying to put into migrant detention centres. No. They have talked about deporting people who have already gained leave to remain, who've already gained a home in this country. These are Trumpian policies. They are unpractical. They are things that would defy British values, and nobody wants them.
But to play devil's advocate for a moment, if the Home Office, in their decision-making process, have decided that somebody has come here illegally, that they don't meet the asylum criteria, then surely it does make sense for them to be detained pending deportation. Otherwise, they could just disappear.
That should be a very small number of people at that stage of things. And we've spoken up again and again about people who have applied for asylum here, most of whom do succeed. Most asylum seekers here are genuine.
It's a diminishing number, actually.
We serve them we owe them a duty to be housed in the places that they have been housed, the hotels, the migrant detention centres that we currently have, that the government have set up, is inhumane. People should be allowed to start building a life here while we consider their case.
Not if they've been refused leave to remain.
If they're refused, then the deportation process should be swift and not involve holding people for many years.
But you can't just put someone on a flight 3 hours after you've lost your hearing, can you? There has to be a period of time in between.
But it should be a very small number of people who are in that period between being refused, running their appeals and actually leaving. And like I say, most most people need to see a more humane process and proper places to live in the community to build their life here when they've claimed asylum.
Well, it is a stunt, but it's a good stunt, saying people should get what they vote for, but it's not practical to implement. It throws out the window principles like equal treatment under the rule of law, lots of public law principles and constitutional conventions like the idea that politicians should rise above party when they're actually governing. I mean, there's always partisan stuff goes on. But, in representing Wickham, I quite often had to say to voters, no, I'm not going to support nationalising the railways, but, I will try to do my best for you. But, I wasn't explicitly saying Greens will get this. I think where I disagree is, much as I have in the past stood up for humane treatment of migrants in detention and worked with some quite left-wing charities to do that, taken the pain for it, I absolutely do believe that when people cross the channel illegally, they should be detained. And they need to be detained in places which are secure, and they need to be promptly deported. And I've seen time and again in my 14 years in Wickham that allowing people to remain in this country for extended periods is an inhumanity. Because if they're here for 10 years without status, they will start a family, and then the system catches up and says you must leave. Far better, more humane, to deport them promptly. So we've got to get real about this. A touching naivety is not okay. And likewise, it's not okay to have inhumane treatment of children in detention. I was horrified with what Robert Jenrick did, making detention centres more frightening for children. Brings a tear to my eye now thinking about it. Horrible thing to do. So humanity in all things, that means deterring people. I remember that Kurdish woman who died trying to join her fiancé at sea, crossing the channel. Inhumane. So humanity in all things, but that does also include upholding the rule of law and detaining those who cross illegally.
OK, Munira.
So do I think it's NIMBY, which I think was the original question? No, I don't think it's NIMBY. I think it's wrong. And as Steve said, I think it's an unworkable policy that would fall at the first legal hurdle. And what's the logical extension of it? Will only those in reform councils and reform parliamentary constituencies get investment in their schools and in their hospitals? I mean, it's
let's
bonkers.
not be naive. And that already happens to an extent where you have people in government from whichever party, and I'm sure this happened under your party in the coalition as well, that there will be your own constituencies that do get preferential treatment. I mean, let's not be naive.
Yeah, but there is certainly, I think, an element of that, but I mean, not to the extent that it's completely unevidenced based and that, you don't have parties turning around and saying, well, if you vote for a particular party, we won't invest in you or we'll threaten to do this to your area. But what's at the heart of this is you've got these two parties on the extreme edges of our politics at the moment, squabbling without any sensible, workable solutions. And let's not forget, Farage, who's backing, obviously it's his party's policy, was the chief cheerleader for Brexit. And it was as a result of Brexit that we lost all our returns agreements with all these EU countries. And we didn't have a small boats problem, frankly, before Brexit. Sorry, Steve.
You're drawing a conclusion there, which I don't think stands up in fact, because we had a lorry problem before Brexit, and that was solved.
But it was nowhere
we had a trains problem.
But it was nowhere near the scale of the small boats problem. And even the Migration Observatory has said that there is now a Brexit effect in terms of the small boats problem. So we as Liberal Democrats are probably most out there in trying to push for a rebuilding of our relationship with Europe so we can start to tackle this problem as well as our economic and security issues. But also, we've said, given the urgency, and to Steve's point about dealing with people quickly and humanely, nobody should be waiting months and actually even years for their asylum application to be processed, which is why last year we said this is something of a national emergency. We should put in place these Nightingale processing centres, double the number of processors to try and clear the backlog ASAP in a period of about 6 months. And we think that's doable if you focus on it.
And Danny Beales, why hasn't that happened? Because in the election campaign, Yvette Cooper, who was then the Shadow Home Affairs spokesperson, kept saying, well, we're going to employ lots more people to get all these things processed more quickly. Is that really happening?
Well, it is. And I think this is from Nigel Farage, a cheap gimmick. That's all it is. I don't want to see hotels moved around the chessboard of the UK. I want to see them closed full stop. And I this more than anyone in England. We've had the largest number of hotel places for asylum seekers for some time under the last government. 3 large hotels around Heathrow. So I see the impacts. I see the division it creates in community. I see the terrible conditions these people are living in, these human beings are living in. The system was broken.
What, in 3 or 4 star hotels?
They're not 3 or 4 star, and
most of them are.
Well, these aren't, and they're generally poor conditions that people are living in. They're not great. Multiple people in a room, really terrible for them and terrible for the community they sit in. But as I said, what we need to do is not be talking about.
We haven't got a Reform UK person here, so I'm going to play that role. The fact is, if these people are legitimate asylum seekers and they've flown torture or possible death in their own countries, putting up with sharing a room with 2 or 3 other people, I wouldn't say was a great hardship.
But it's not about sharing a room. These people are coming over in small boats, many of them dying in awful situations, involved with people smuggling, criminal gangs, all sorts, coming here and living in terrible facilities, often really struggling to get basic healthcare. Again, I'm not saying ultimately the biggest issue is to feel sorry for people coming here illegally. I'm saying the system is broken. It doesn't work for the people in the system. It doesn't work for the communities around the hotels. My point is we need to close these hotels and sort the system. And I think your point's right. This government has moved all the people that were wasting their time on this Rwanda scheme that never sent I think a couple of volunteers for hundreds of millions of pounds to Rwanda, redistributed all of those civil servants working on that bonker scheme to processing applications, to sorting out the system. We are seeing the backlog come down. We are seeing deportations go up. And we've seen 11 more hotels close, including one of the 3 in my constituency. And another one is approaching being empty. So I think progress is happening. I want to see it happen as quickly as possible, and the government's committed to end hotel use by the first term of this government. But I think, as has been said by Munira, unfortunately, the populists on the left and the right at the moment clearly don't have a sense of how to solve this. We've got Nigel Farage talking about moving hotels around, and the Green Party talk about open borders.
We talk about
as the
safe
solution.
routes, which is the way to make sure that people are not coming here illegally. You have to be able to claim and get your legitimate asylum claims assessed. That will reduce the problem hugely.
There just isn't public consent to have large numbers of people come through safe routes to get here. And I think for whatever one's view, one has to recognise that there would be absolute outrage in this country if we significantly increase the number of asylum seekers we took. I think it has to be said, to Munira's point about parties on the extremes, a great realignment.
That's apparently you, by the way.
Well, I reject that, obviously.
A great
we
realignment.
wouldn't be so high in the polls if we were an extreme party.
Well, that's it. But to pick up your point as well, Iain, a great realignment is taking place in politics, whereby the main axis is no longer economics, so that it's us arguing with each other about capitalism versus socialism. It's now identity and culture. Are you a communitarian nationalist or are you a cosmopolitan globalist? Which is why the Green Party's talking more about identity issues, the point you made earlier, and it's why Nigel Farage is doing so well, and it's why the Labour Party is losing votes to Reform, votes which would never come to the Conservative Party. It's because the main axis has realigned. Now, it's not complete, it's not total, but this is what is happening. Great book, Steve Davies has written it, The Great Realignment. I think until politicians, commentators, journalists, if I may say so, have understood this phenomenon is happening everywhere. Maloney, Trump, AfD in East Germany.
Well, I mean, it seems clear that the results on Thursday are going to show that the Greens and Reform are going to be the two
and it's the
big
great
winners, possibly the
reaction.
Liberal Democrats winning a bit as well, but not to the same extent. So I think you may have a good point there. Right, more calls to come. It's 8:45.
This is LBC.
You've probably been with the same energy supplier for decades. And why wouldn't you be? Loyalty matters. But lately, bigger hasn't always felt better. You've probably dealt with long waits and endless automated menus in search of someone who can actually help. Octopus Energy is now Britain's biggest energy supplier, trusted by over 8 million customers, because we do things differently. Our people focus on the most important thing, you. When you call, you'll speak to a real person. No robotic scripts, no computer says no, just an honest conversation with someone who actually wants to help. Join the millions who've already made the move. Octopus Energy, recommended by Which? A record 9 years running. Visit octopus.energy/better for verification.
Is your cat drinking enough? Discover Discover Purina One Hydrolife and help support their daily hydration with a taste they'll enjoy. Purina One Hydrolife. Make it easy.
May we have your attention? Introducing the Volkswagen May event. Get an extra £1,000 towards your finance deposit with Solutions PCP 7.9% APR representative across the range, including the amazing Golf, Tiguan, and all-electric ID3. Major. I said it was in May, right?
Yes.
Ends Monday the 18th of May. Visit your nearest Volkswagen retailer. You may just find the car you've been looking for.
Stop it.
Participating retailers. Excludes T-Roc ID bars and Golf GTI 50. ID3 from stock only. Indemnities may be required. Registered by 30th of August. Volkswagen Finance.
Octopus Energy. Great value and outstanding customer service. Recommended by which? A record 9 years running.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
8:47. Danny Beals, Munira Wilson, Sean Berry and Steve Baker with us taking your questions. Here's one from Rico in Kingsbury. With America now so unreliable, Trump is trying to blackmail us to get into his stupid war by threatening to rip up our trade deal. Shouldn't we accept that paying the EU $1 billion a year to undo some of the damage of Brexit is a sensible move? You can just reply yes, Munira Wilson.
Well, what I would say is actually getting closer to Europe in terms of our economy and in terms of our country's security is absolutely the right way forward. And not just actually the European Union, but other Commonwealth countries such as Canada, Australia and so on. But absolutely we should be rebuilding our relationship with the European Union. Our economy has taken a huge hit, with some independent analysts suggesting as much as £90 billion economic hit just last year alone. So we Liberal Democrats say, look, let's be ambitious. Unfortunately, this government, Keir Starmer, has set himself some fairly strong red lines. I want us to get the best deal possible. If we want to be in a better position to negotiate a better deal, let's put something like a EU-UK customs union on the table, which Keir Starmer's refused to do. That will give us the leverage to negotiate the best deal possible for the British people, for our economy, for our security, and also to invest in public services as a result.
Why won't you just be honest and say, I want to rejoin?
And with the euro and everything else. Go on, do it.
We never said that we wanted to join the euro.
You said you wanted a real referendum on the EU, in or out, until it was actually a thing.
So we've said in our last manifesto that we've set out a roadmap towards being back at the heart of Europe, which would be multi-stage. The first stage of we've done some of those first things, like Erasmus, to give the Labour government its due credit. Customs union is the next stage, and then beyond that. But let's face it, there is no trust in the European Union towards the UK. That relationship was massively broken as a result of the hard Brexit deal by the Conservatives.
I did my bit to patch it up with my famous apology.
So I think they don't want us back anytime soon. The British public isn't ready for that. The main thing is that people are feeling poorer. Our public services are on their knees. If we want to grow the economy, which every political party or most political parties say they want to do, the best way to turbocharge that is by strengthening our relationship with the European Union, starting with the customs union.
Could you explain why, therefore, the growth rate in all Western European countries is lower than ours? I mean, if that's going to turbocharge our growth rate, surely they would already have a much bigger growth rate than we have.
Well, but the point is that if we were trading again with the European Union without the barriers, we would, it might be that we would have, if we'd stayed in the European Union, we might have had a better growth rate than them. It doesn't necessarily follow just because they did that we would be worse.
Such tosh.
Steve.
While Munira began speaking, I tweeted out a comprehensive rebuttal of all these economic claims from the economist Julian Jessup on a Substack. I recommend your readers go and look at your most recent this evening tweet and have a look at the Substack linked. It's got a rebuttal to all these daft claims. If you index European GDP, I recommend your listeners go onto Our World in Data, index European similar nations to 100 in 2016 and look for the outlier on GDP growth. They'll find there is an outlier on GDP growth. It's Germany. Germany's grown much less well than the UK. The UK's GDP growth, as a matter of fact, just look at the data, not projections and silly CGE models. The UK's grown about comparably with similar nations in the EU. the idea that we've lost 8%, you'd have to believe that if we'd stayed in the EU, we'd have leapfrogged all these other nations. It's laughable. As I say, I've tweeted out a rebuttal. I just really ask, where are the fact checkers? The claims that are being made don't stand a moment's serious scrutiny. I've tweeted out the article that goes through it all. What I would implore them to think about is, does it matter who makes our laws? Because all this language about getting closer, I'm all for being closer, but what I'm not for is us accepting their laws without a say on them. That's the problem. I think democracy matters. I think it matters in all of our lives, however we vote, that the public have an opportunity to remove politicians and others who make their laws peacefully at the ballot box, because that's better than the other way.
So, Steve, even if you think those numbers are wrong, do you not agree that huge numbers of British businesses now struggle much more to trade with the European Union because of the friction that's been caused as a result? If
you were a business that shipped small packages into the customs union, if it relied on the customs union, then yes, needing to make customs declarations is harmful to your business. I had one or two in Wickham. I did the best I could to help them. There's a few things to say about it. So there are some simple fixes, like on Incoterms, which I'm sure we're not going to get into. It is possible, by the careful selection of Incoterms, to deal with customs declaration problem. But you're furrowing your brow at me. This is one of the things, forgive me, but I was the Brexit minister responsible for preparing us to exit. And things like Euratom, I was able to deal with, not easily, but I was able to deal with. Euratom was never a problem. It was supposed to be a big problem. It wasn't. I was able to ride another department successfully and get all that international negotiation done. And it was very personal, I couldn't do was prepare the country to lead the customs union, because the Treasury wouldn't cooperate, and the Treasury had all the customs expertise and they wouldn't let me direct it, and that meant we couldn't get ready to lead the customs union because the Treasury wasn't willing to do it. And that's why this is such a nightmare, and that's why those businesses have suffered, because in 2017, when I set out to do it, I was prevented by the Treasury from helping those small businesses be ready. A frustration.
And part of that was because the Treasury under George Osborne didn't have a single civil servant preparing for Brexit. He told me that the week before the referendum date. Sian?
Yeah, and this is ridiculous. Of course, whether or not we're beating European countries isn't the measure of whether or not Brexit did harm. Being involved in the EU was good for everyone's economy. We'd all be doing better. And there's really clear evidence on that. And I think if you speak to any small business that's trying to export, that's making things in this country, I've got several of them in Brighton and Hove that have talked to me. They are incredibly frustrated, particularly with the customs union. And we cannot have what I think the Prime Minister is talking about, which is getting into the single market only for some of the bigger, more well-stocked with lobbyists industries like cars, like pharmaceuticals, which have big problems, but also have big pockets to influence the government. It's those smaller businesses that cannot cope with the friction that there now is, with the barriers that there are now to expanding into Europe, that really need to be listened to. And there I'm only talking about the economy and small business. There's so much else to it as well. It was so positive to be in the EU. And what I want to see by the next election is a proper conversation about properly rejoining. And this would be a free hit for Keir Starmer and his team. 4 out of 5 people who voted Labour at the last election want to rejoin. Only 1 in 10 of them is opposed. And if you want those people to come back, this is something that could be really positive for Keir Starmer to do. And that's my free advice on how to make himself more popular.
But Sian, why do you think it is that neither the Liberal Democrats nor Labour are willing to go down that road, even though all the polls show that you're right?
I think it's a case of political courage. And I think I'd love the Lib Dems to start joining us in this kind of campaigning, because we do need to be talking about going back to the full benefits we used to have and working much more closely with Europe. And this goes for...
Even if it means joining the euro?
I'm not sentimental about the pound. I know some people are, but obviously we all pay online these days anymore. So
the collective debt,
maybe currency is less.
The collective bond issuance that would be necessary to prop up and make the euro work properly.
I think we can talk about all that.
Taking on Spain's pension
people want
debt.
to go back to where we were, and they know that Brexit was a mistake, and I don't think you can deny that.
I think
we haven't heard from Danny, Steve. We haven't heard from Danny yet.
I respectfully disagree. I think we do need control over our interest rates and have independent monetary and fiscal policy. I think that's a good thing for the UK, and it's been shown very recently in recent years why that is the case. But I think it's important not to just fall back into this binary divide, leave, rejoin, the kind of Brexit kind of, I think, collective trauma is coming out immediately. So I think a lot of us lived through many years of trauma as related to the Brexit process. The nation felt kind of pulled apart. Families, my own family divided. My grandparents in Clacton-on-Sea have a very different view about this matter than I do.
But that's partly why I want it in the general election.
They've got a good way to get their own back on you.
Yeah, indeed. But what is clear to me is that everything we were promised around Brexit has not materialised. We were promised more control and more sovereignty. I don't think people would say at the moment we feel particularly sovereign. We feel very reliant on the US around defence, around a lot of infrastructure, are very vulnerable on a number of spheres. Energy interdependence, for instance. Our economy has not been buoyant over the last 10 years. It's stagnated, and we've not seen more control over our borders. We've seen record levels of immigration under the last government and a lack of control, and we've discussed that issue already. So for me, a reset is needed with the European Union, and the future is collaboration across a number of spheres of defence, of energy, of trade, and lowering the barriers to trade. And I think business are welcoming this, as has been said. M&S, a number of large food businesses have said it is a good thing, the path the government is taking to improve our trading relationships.
Well, some haven't.
I mean, European Union.
I just wish, because I'm all in favour of collaboration with the EU, just as I'm all in favour of collaboration with the Pacific Rim countries in the CPTPP trade deal that I worked so hard to get us to accede to, making it a new global platform for free trade. The UK joining the Pacific Rim deal makes it a global platform for free trade without political integration.
What of those trade deals, those miraculous trade deals, many of which never really materialised, actually delivered?
Well, that is,
your government's negotiated some of them.
That is mere rhetoric. We could spend a good couple of hours unpacking just your last answer. I think the thing I would say to your listeners is you have to ask yourself, do you care how our laws are made? I was a European federalist because there are good reasons for being in the EU. I'm a classical liberal. I was in favour of the EU for all sorts of reasons for a long time on classical liberal grounds, until I looked at how it made its laws and that those laws overrode our parliament. I'd love to know what proportion of Remain voters understand that all the time that we've been in the European Union, their law trumps ours.
And how sovereign are we at the moment with the US around trade, around online
Danny,
safety?
this is you talking about collaboration.
That's exactly the point, isn't it? Sovereignty often has to be pulled to come to arrangements, to come to agreements.
If you and
I would much rather we pool our sovereignty with our European neighbours and partners than be beholden to Trump. This
is exactly why I think that a rejoin referendum couldn't be trusted, because you're talking about this. It's
about reset.
I'm not calling for a referendum either.
No, at least 3 against 1 here. It's definitely 3 against 1. We are not subjected to the US Supreme Court. Of course, collaboration always involves compromise and adjustment. If we were neighbours, I've got neighbours, we share a driveway and we share in the maintenance of that drive and all the rest of it. They don't tell me what the rules are in my house. And this is the thing, collaboration, particularly in an interventionist age, and with free trade is never going to be just totally laissez-faire. There's always going to be collaboration and compromise. There is in CPTPP, the Pacific Rim Trade Deal, but it doesn't require political integration. And the one thing really I got into politics to do, actually it wasn't to get us out, although I thought we should leave, it was to get us at least allow the public to have a vote after the Lisbon Treaty was rammed through positively against referendum results. I'm amazed you're not all furious that the European Union advanced its constitution positively against referendums that said no to it.
I'm furious of the state this country was left in. The promises we made.
Yeah, but we said exactly the same in 2010.
All right,
Danny,
we have run out of time, but we do want to fit in our fun question from Freddie in Hampton Wick, wherever that is.
That's my constituency.
Is it?
Yes.
Oh, how lovely.
Well, there you are. I wonder if you'll be impressed by this question. The US Defense Secretary has refused to confirm or deny that America's military has trained so-called kamikaze dolphins. Which animal are you most frightened of? Danny?
I'm quite scared about the concept of kamikaze dolphins, to be honest. Now I've heard of them and the US are developing them. But mostly I'm absolutely terrified about snakes.
Yeah.
Kind of not an unusual one, but absolutely terrified.
Sean?
Sharks, with or without laser beams, I'm afraid. I'm a child of watching Jaws at a too young an age, and I'm massively in favour of shark conservation, but also barely could have a bath for a few years after watching that.
Dear. Munira?
Lots of animals. Yes, snakes, sharks, but also bears and lions. I mean, where does one stop? There's a lot of scary animals out there.
Steve?
Tigers, because chairing the ERG was tiger herding. And I'll never get over it.
I tell you what, after you chaired that lot, you shouldn't be scared of anything.
True story.
Thank you all very much indeed. On tomorrow's panel, we have the chair of the Labour Party, Anna Turley, Conservative peer Lord Stuart Jackson, the journalist and Reform UK supporter Tim Montgomery, plus the Guardian columnist Polly Toynbee. That should be a spicy one. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to talk about zero tolerance on crime. It's something that hasn't really been on the agenda for many, many years. Rudy Giuliani, who's sadly ill in hospital at the moment, he pioneered it in New York. We had various Metropolitan Police and crime commissioners adopt aspects of it. But Kemi Badenoch wants to go hell for leather for zero tolerance, particularly on what she calls lower level crimes like shoplifting, fare dodging and vandalism. It all goes back to the so-called theory of broken windows. If you mend all your broken windows, everything else will follow. Is she right? Is that a vote winner? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, prosecutors in England and Wales are being told to fast-track suspected hate crimes in response to recent anti-Semitic attacks. It follows a summit at Downing Street, which brought together community leaders, police chiefs and politicians to discuss the issue. Director of Public Prosecution Stephen Parkinson has told LBC it's a crisis.
Parents walking their children to school and having abuse hurled at them like genocide. Slogans of one kind or another directed at young children. We mustn't get to the point where that sort of behaviour is tolerated.
Well, the Prime Minister told a meeting earlier that the targeting of Jewish community had turned the issue into a crisis. Speaking from Downing Street, Sakir said police are looking into whether a foreign state is behind some of the attacks.
Our message to Iran or to any other country that might seek to foment violence, hatred or division in society is that it will not be tolerated.
The US Secretary of State told reporters that the US will continue to target drones and boats posing a threat to US forces in the Strait of Hormuz. Marco Rubio says America will respond with lethal efficiency, adding their operation is a defensive one. He says Iran must come to the negotiating table and accept terms. Meanwhile, within the last few minutes, the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations Centre has said that a cargo vessel has been struck by an unknown projectile in the Strait of Hormuz. 4 Palestinian Action activists have been found guilty of raiding the UK site of an Israeli defence firm in Bristol. The group caused £1 million worth of damage at Elbit Systems in August 2024. The government's putting plans in place to get British people stuck on a cruise ship in the Atlantic home. 3 people died in a suspected hantavirus on board. And a record 1.3 million people have applied to take part in next year's London Marathon. That's more than double the total number who applied 2 years ago. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed down 144 points at 10,219. The pound buys $1.35 and €1.15. LBC weather clearer in the east tonight with the odd shower for North Sea coasts. Isolated showers further west, a low of -1. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 9:05 on LBC. Welcome to the programme if you've just joined us. I don't know where you've been because we've had a cracking couple of hours on the show. Let's have another one, shall we? Because I want to talk about zero tolerance in this hour because Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition, leader of the Conservative Party, she says that Britain needs zero tolerance on crimes that make our lives a misery. She says there must be consequences for shoplifting, fare dodging and vandalism. She pledged a crackdown on welfare, asylum and low-level crime. She said voters were crying out for a tougher approach that would deliver consequences for those ripping off the system. She was giving an interview to the Daily Mail, and she said a Tory government would prevent anyone from claiming benefits as a lifestyle choice. Well, all Tory oppositions promise that, and yet when they get into government, it seems a lot more difficult to achieve. And she called for a no-tolerance approach to crimes such as shoplifting, fare dodging and vandalism, and public drug taking, which she said were making life miserable for so many people. Well, she's right on that, isn't she? Because I think we all get really angry when we see people dodging fares, because we've paid the money, and yet some people think that it's their right to get away with it. So why should people get away with it? Surely there should be a zero-tolerance approach to this. Similarly, with vandalism. Nobody approves of vandalism, presumably the people that do it do. But that is where antisocial behaviour and vandalism, I think they plight various areas of our towns and cities, generally towns and cities. I mean, villages aren't immune to it, but it is generally towns and cities. And yet, if it is sort of stubbed out at source, then those areas generally sort of appear to be nicer places to live. The people that live in them enjoy their lives more. So why do we have this sort of lax approach to this so-called low-level crime? Shoplifting, people think of as some sort of victimless crime. Well, it isn't. We all suffer from the excessive amount of shoplifting that is going on in our country at the moment because it puts prices up. So if you're concerned about the cost of living crisis, you ought to be somebody that wants to do something about shoplifting. Now, a zero-tolerance approach was tried in New York back, 25 years ago when Rudy Giuliani was mayor of New York. And it really did work. It improved communities. It improved the quality of life. Yet our politicians have always been a little bit reluctant to go down this road, fearing that they'll be accused of being authoritarian, fascist, whatever. I wonder whether you think that this is something that we need to revisit, because Kemi Badenoch clearly does. She's pledged funding an extra 10,000 police officers to implement a broken windows style strategy, which helped clean up the likes of New York in the 1990s and 2000s to ensure that even minor acts of antisocial behaviour are dealt with seriously. Now, that all seems quite logical and sensible to me. So why isn't our current government doing it? Why didn't the last Conservative government adopt this strategy? Presumably because it would involve employing a hell of a lot more police officers to act as a deterrent, if nothing else. Is that something that you would like to see happen in this country? A much tougher approach to law and order, in particular for low-level crimes? Because I suppose the theory goes that if people commit low-level crimes, well, then they might graduate to more high-level crimes. If you snuff it out at source, then they might not do that. I guess that's the theory. It's called the broken windows theory, which we'll talk about more in just a moment. So I'd really love to hear your views on that, because if you look at any public opinion survey, most people want to have a much tougher approach to law and order. People are sick and tired of their local communities being abused by ne'er-do-wells. So it's about a 19th century expression, isn't it? But you know what I mean. So let me know what you think. Is Kemi Badenoch onto something here? I saw a video of her yesterday having a interaction with, I don't know whether it was a protester, I think it was a female protester who was berating her for her views on anti-Semitism. And she kept her calm, but she was very trenchant in her response to this woman and said that she wasn't going to be silenced. Now, this wasn't about law and order in one sense, but it rather echoes what she has promised to do in this interview with the Daily Mail. I think we can actually hear this exchange now.
You can say all that you like, but this is how the 1930s started, with people pretending not to see what was happening in front of them. I am not blind. I can see. No. I'm telling people the truth, and they will always know that I stand behind Jewish people and I stand for them. I'm sorry, but I disagree with you. You just have to accept that. Yes, that's too bad. That's too bad. People know where I stand, and I'm not going to be intimidated. I'm not going. No. I am the right. I am the right. Yes, and I'm very proud of being on the right. I'm not pandering to the far right. What I am doing is supporting. No. What I'm doing is supporting Jewish people from the sort of ignorant people like you put out there, and I will never be intimidated by it.
You see, all power to her elbow when she talks like that. I think people want politicians who are going to say what they mean and mean what they say. And I just hope that if she ever gets the chance to put these kinds of policies in place, that she does follow through with them. But that is the problem with opposition politicians and parties, isn't it? You can promise the earth before you get into power, but how does the electorate have any confidence that you will deliver on what you've promised before the election? I mean, I think the last government was guilty of that. I certainly think the current government is guilty of that. So what are your views on zero tolerance? Is that something that we should have a look at implementing in this country? Professor Anthony Goodman joins me now, who's Professor of Criminal and Community Social Justice at Middlesex University. Professor, thank you very much for joining us. Can we start by talking about this broken windows theory and whether it actually works? Because Sian Berry, who was on in the last hour, she was walking out the studio, she said, well, Malcolm Gladwell has been writing about this. He was a firm supporter of the broken windows theory, but has now renounced it. What is it, and is it something that we should look at more closely?
Well, thank you for the introduction. Yes, it's an interesting theory in that it goes back to the early 80s, and it's really about social disorganisation. And what it says is that if you have weak social cohesion, if people feel that nothing is working, they'll move out of those areas and the area will further deteriorate. And I think what we have to differentiate really is between what might appeal to us in terms of being very angry at people who commit these type of offences, and realistically what we can do to change things. Now, sadly, as you were just saying about that last person, there isn't the evidence to show that broken windows was effective. Bill Bratton, to about 97, 98, tried this in New York, and although crime did fall, of course, it was falling in other areas in America that didn't use the same process, so that there isn't evidence that this approach works. And why is that? What is going on here? Well, we're in a situation at the moment where our prisons are full. Nobody really is able to take on a more punitive approach, because there's nowhere to put people. Let's try and be a bit more imaginative. Now, I read what Kemi Badenoch said, and one of the things she said was, let charities do the soft stuff and let government do the tough stuff. Now, that would imply that something is okay, let's just do something, but actually let's be tough. Actually, when I've been looking at and working closely with the community gangs team in Hackney for the last few years, and what works really effectively is when the statutory agencies and the voluntary agencies work effectively together to try and bring some hope to those communities, that if people do feel there isn't a lot going for them, then give them some encouragement. And when you talk to young people, as I do, young offenders, what they're saying is, we want apprenticeships. School didn't really work for us. It didn't help us. Give us something where we can earn some money and do something that works. And in a lot of these areas, what I would say is that there's been an absence of hope. Now, in Hackney, they took the area which had the highest crime rate, and they did put in what you might call a tough approach in one sense. They put in more secure cameras, they cleaned up, and they were targeting people. But they also injected money into some of the local projects. There's an excellent one called the Pedro Club, which reaches out in the community and offers all sorts of supports to lots of people, young, old. And what you find is that crime does go down if you give people hope. Just thinking that being punitive will change people, if people are feeling pretty negative, I'm afraid there's not much evidence that does do much.
There were some studies many years ago, I think, when the train companies started replacing all of their rolling stock, which generally was full of graffiti and sort of dirty seats and all the rest of it. When all these new trains came in, sort of turn of the century onwards, they found that people didn't abuse them, that there was much less graffiti. And yes, there's always an exception to that, and I see it on my line a bit. But if you give people good facilities, they're less likely to abuse them. Now, I guess that is part of what the whole broken windows process sort of represents, in a sense. But there has to be some sort of punitive punishment, because if people are caught doing something which, okay, you might say is low-level crime, if there is no punishment and just an arm around the shoulder, does that really work?
Well, it's not really arm around the shoulder, is it? What you need to do with people is look at some of the reasons, whether it's drug taking. Now, I would differentiate between some of the organised crime. And I've been in the supermarket and I've seen people running out with a whole case full of meat, a lot of money, and that's perhaps to order. That is a different scope for me than somebody who's gone in there and taken something because they haven't got very much and haven't got much hope. And I think, yes, it's fair enough to target organised crime, and the only way to do that, I think, is to engage with the community. And what they found in Hackney, in the area that I was referring to, was that if you actually get the different type of officials meeting together so that they get the cars off the street that have been abandoned, that they give people hope, then people will come forward and they will start to complain about what is going on in the area. If you give people hope, they will do things. And I think just saying 10,000 police, that will change things. I'm afraid it won't. And we have a system at the moment which is absolutely choked. There is no space, there's no capacity, and unless you're proposing that suddenly we turn army bases over into prisoner war camps or whatever it is that you're, to try and do something.
I don't. I'm
to change the.
Yeah, I'm certainly not suggesting that. I don't believe that incarceration for this type of offence here is an answer at all. It never has been. Yeah. And the sort of short, sharp shock approach, which I remember Willie Whitelaw was advocating in the 1980s, we know that doesn't work. So there's got to be a sort of happy medium here. And you're right, we haven't got the prison places, even if we thought that sort of multiple shoplifters should actually go to prison. In the end, though, surely it's all about pride in your community, that if your housing estate looks shambolic, if all of the gardens are ramshackle, if there's sort of caravans with sort of 2 wheels on, 2 wheels off, sort of polluting, burnt out cars all over the place, nobody's going to take pride in their community. Crime will proliferate. But I think we saw, certainly in the 1980s, when there was all of the council houses were sold off, and I mean that's a whole other argument. But I remember experiencing this in Norwich, which was a city, effectively more than half of it is council estates. The pride in those housing estates by 1990 meant that the crime rates in those areas absolutely plummeted because people didn't want to see crime in their areas.
And I agree with you. I think what we're needing is a sense of community, in the sense that people take a pride in their area. And I know when I go and I live by the side of an area called Wanstead Flats, I'll go on there and I'll pick up litter because it upsets me to see it. How do you engender that in people? I think you have to do it by giving people hope. And that way you get a community that might be prepared to, and I know that might sound soft, but you have to start from a beginning. You have to say, how do you get people to believe that things will change? And that might mean that you reach out. Now, in Hackney, and I think as in many other areas, I'll just use that as an example, there's been much less visibility between the police and the local community. The police are not there on the streets as much. So it's okay saying let's have 10,000 police, but how are you going to deploy them? And I think what we have to do is bring the community and officialdom much closer together so that it's not seen as a force, but as a.
I think a lot of people would very much disagree with you. They want to see more people on the streets, and that will actually reassure people and deter crime. But we've run out of time, Professor. Sorry about that.
Disagreeing with that, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. We'll end in agreement. That's Professor Anthony Goodman there, Professor of Criminal and Community Social Justice at Middlesex University. We'll come to your calls in a moment. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Is zero tolerance something that we should adopt in this country, or do you agree with the professor there that actually it's never really worked and we need to adopt a much more or should we say softly approach to low-level crime. That's not what Kemi Badenoch thinks. It's 9:20.
This is LBC.
Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. And come on in to Classic FM Calm, LBC's soothing sister station. Find peace in the music with Classic FM Calm. Listen on Global Player or ask your smart speaker to play Classic FM Calm.
I'm Will Buxton.
I'm Naomi Schiff.
I'm David Coulthard.
And I'm Jolie Sharp.
This is Up to Speed. Available every Monday and Thursday on Global Player or wherever you get your podcasts.
Oh, bad traffic. Great news, isn't it? More time in the car. Joy. Maybe you don't feel it. Maybe you don't drive a Lexus NX yet. But when you do, you'll see the positive of peak hour, the delight in a detour, the love of the long way. The Lexus NX plug-in hybrid. Experience amazing before you arrive.
Your time is valuable. Your perspective should be too. The Economist cuts through the noise with the stories that truly shape your world.
How can you believe that a new regime won't crush you just like the previous one?
Online scams are stranger than they've ever been.
When the world's turned upside down, know which way is up. Read, watch, or listen to The Economist.
Donations to British Heart Foundation fund scientific research that can help save lives. People like Joe, who's pitching his next big business plan. Maria, who's sending out her wedding invitations, and Jack, who's just being a teenager again. Because when you donate, you fund more than just science. You help save lives. British Heart Foundation funds research that aims to cure inherited heart muscle diseases, but our work is not done. Donate now at bhf.org.uk and keep us beating.
Iain Dale on LBC.
9:22 on LBC. I want you to think about your own local community and the crime problems that your community experiences on a daily, weekly basis. I think anybody that experiences a large amount of, even if it's low-level crime, whether it's graffiti, whether it's low-level antisocial behaviour, whether it's fare dodging in your local tube station or something like that, or just general low-level vandalism, what would you like to see done about it? Would you like to see the miscreants banged up? Or do you think that, well, there's a reason that people commit these crimes and we need to understand that a little bit more and condemn possibly a little bit less? I think there has to be a happy medium here between punishment and understanding. And I've never bought into this idea, and I think it's actually deeply insulting. I've never bought into this idea that just because you may be on your financial uppers, that means that you're therefore more likely to be a criminal. Most people know the difference between right and wrong. And just because you can't afford something does not mean that you're therefore more likely to become a criminal and steal it, does it? Let's go to Marcus, who's in Sheffield. Hello, Marcus.
Yeah, I feel the standard of what you're just saying there is absolutely scandalous. I think you're showing absolute lack of insight into any human condition or humanity. The fact that you're talking about is those people that are within prison, and I'm talking as somebody talking about nearly 30 years. I'm currently a magistrate, but I've worked within prisons. I've worked within every aspect of the criminal justice system. And what you're saying is the epitome of why our attitudes to how we deal with this is completely incorrect. You're talking those that are being sexually abused. You talked about, they might have not much money, so, I don't think that will offend. No, these are people that are the most damaged in our society. And people like you and what you're representing are against investing in the services that should help these people. So, I don't know. That's what I think about that.
Well, you said a lot of things that you think. I don't know how you've inferred that I think a lot of the things that you've just said, because I most certainly do not.
I demonstrated it quite clearly. I'm happy to break it down if it's
feel free.
Difficult for you to understand.
Oh, don't be patronising.
I just did do. I think I just did do. I thought I articulated it pretty much okay.
Well, you talked about sexual abuse. I never mentioned sexual abuse.
No, and I'm talking about those people that are those within our prisons that we obviously there's some punishment for what they've done, but ultimately we're not creating the care. I mean, we can demonstrate it on so many levels. The amount of lack of investment the Conservatives or Reform will want to put into public services for those that through no fault of their own, but you will reward people for being born into a certain bloodline or to a certain name. They'll be rewarded. They've got land, they've got privilege. Those without...
Well, but believe it or not, people from those backgrounds also commit criminal offences.
Of course they do. I'm not even talking about it. You're missing the point entirely there.
Well, I think maybe I'm missing your point completely, because all the things that you've accused me of, I don't think I'm guilty of.
Well, we'll have to agree to disagree on that then, won't we?
Well, no, explain what you mean by what you've just said. I mean, I specifically said that I did not believe that people who commit low-level crimes should be automatically sent to prison.
No, I didn't say that you did think that. But I said that you demonstrated very little empathy or understanding, and just felt that because people say that they're poor, that leads them to crime. And now that was such a basic, without us,
I think I was showing great empathy, because I don't think we should automatically... Well, hang on a second. I don't believe that we should automatically assume that if somebody's poor, if somebody's unemployed, that they are automatically going to lead a life of crime. I think that's an insulting thing to say to those people.
No, and I agree, but...
I mean, I'm terrified, mate, that you're a magistrate, given what you've just said.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because I don't think you have the mindset that can administer justice properly. I mean, quite how you qualified for it, I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll qualify more than you've got the ability to have this argument.
Well, I've never tried to be a magistrate.
No, I hope not as well. I really hope not.
Well, this is going well, isn't it, Marcus?
Right.
You see, that's what happens when you're gratuitously rude to somebody and accuse them of saying things that they haven't actually said and don't believe.
I think I've triggered something, if I'm being honest.
Well, you've triggered me because you've been patronising and rude, and frankly, I don't really want to continue this conversation unless you've got something constructive to say.
I mean, that's as constructive as I wanted to convey, to be honest.
Well, that says a lot about you, doesn't it?
I mean, what was that about? What? There's no need.
No, there isn't any need for you to be so patronising and rude.
It was what I was presented with. So you get what you're given, don't you?
So do you believe that anybody who commits a low-level crime event should be punished, or that we should just try and sort of understand
I think we should have a greater understanding in terms of why that's happened, as in terms of just thinking, I've been a victim of crime, and obviously there's the need to think that we need to punish, and clearly there's a role for that. But what you were saying before, it just evokes it. I'm sure you hate the Green Party. I'm sure.
I don't hate the Green Party. I'm not a hater.
Oh, I'm sure you have issues with. I'm not. Again, you're trying to. Why would you say that?
You just said, I'm sure you hate the Green Party, and I've just said to you, I don't hate the Green Party. What part of that is so difficult for your minute brain to comprehend?
But you see, what on earth was that? I would never come out with an insult like that.
Well, you just did. You accused me of hating the Green Party, and I said I don't.
I apologise for expressing that word as hate, but expressing that it might have issues with. Well, you chose to ignore that and go in for an insult yourself. It's like, what?
You think you're really funny, don't you?
At this moment, yeah, pretty much.
Well, I doubt whether anyone else who's listening does.
I think the politics of the extremities that you're trying to convey.
How have I tried to convey the politics of extremities, for goodness sake? Go on, justify what you mean by that.
Because it's why I originally called in.
How have I been extreme?
Because, as I say, it was your lack of empathy with anybody that might have done something wrong or committed a crime. It was the way in which you expressed it and the language that you used, and it was very disrespectful, and it didn't come across very nice. I don't know how much more I can explain that.
Well, I don't, because you've just accused me of being extreme, and you can't actually explain why I've been extreme. I mean, not expressing empathy is not being extreme.
It is, because I understand where that leads, and our current divisiveness in society, which I think you're fueling by the way you express yourself, is what I'm saying.
Well, you're entitled to your opinion, Marcus, but God help us if there are more magistrates like you. It's 9:31 on LBC. Let's get the news headlines with Daryl Jackson.
The Chief Prosecutor for England and Wales says hate crime cases will be fast-tracked following a rise in anti-Semitic attacks. The announcement comes after the Prime Minister held a summit with community groups, police and government ministers to discuss tackling the issue. 2 passengers on a cruise ship at the centre of a deadly hantavirus outbreak will be transported to the Netherlands to receive urgent medical care. The government's putting plans in place to get British people stuck on board off. And detectives have revealed a woman who died in an explosion alongside a man in Bristol had reported someone forcing their way into her home. Avon and Somerset police say he was known to her and had an explosive device and are treating her death as murder. LBC weather clearer in the east tonight with the odd shower for North Sea coasts. Isolated showers further west, lows of -1.
This is LBC.
Have you spotted anything?
Only seagulls. Are you sure this beach is a nature reserve?
Well, the sign said, nature this way. Hey, what's that big bird over there? Flapping its wings, unusual markings.
You sure that sign didn't say naturists?
Oi, this is a nudist beach.
Ooh. Now, where are my binoculars?
Cheryl?
Struggling to read in the sun? Get 2 for 1 at Specsavers and make prescription sunglasses your second pair. From £70 with standard single vision lenses to the same prescription. Terms and conditions apply. See in store for details.
McDonald's breakfast is turning up the heat with a spicy new twist. Calm down, not that spicy. Breakfast is for savouring, not suffering. Introducing McDonald's breakfast with Frank's Red Hot Ketchup. A spicy breakfast suitable for the morning. Until 8th of June, served until 11 a.m, subject to availability.
May we have your attention? Introducing the Volkswagen May event. Get an extra £1,000 towards your finance deposit with Solutions PCP 7.9% APR representative across the range, including the amazing Golf, Tiguan, and all-electric ID3. Major. I said it was in May, right?
Yes.
Ends Monday, the 18th of May. Visit your nearest Volkswagen retailer. You may just find the car you've been looking for.
Stop it.
Participating retailers. Excludes T-Roc ID bars and Golf GTI 50. ID3 from stock only. Indemnities may be required. Registered by 30th of August. Volkswagen Finance.
Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
9:33. Well, that call took a turn, didn't it? James says, I disagree with you at the best of times, but that was absolutely ridiculous. That had to be a wind-up, a horrific caller, but great radio, says James in Stoke. Well, there was a moment during that call when I did think, is this a wind-up? Oh, this guy cannot seriously be a magistrate if this is the kind of things that he's saying or accusing me of. But, well, it takes all sorts, I suppose. Right, but let's get back to the subject. We are talking about whether Kemi Badenoch is right to put forward zero-tolerance approaches towards low-level crimes. I don't even like that phrase, low-level crimes, because if you are the victim of vandalism, do people think fare dodging is a low-level crime or shoplifting? I suppose some people do. But if you are a victim of a so-called low-level crime, you don't consider it low-level, do you? But the professor, and to an extent that the last caller, they were making the point that, well, you're not going to take people out of a life of crime just by punishment. There has to be more to it than that. And I think we do need to understand why people commit crimes, what motivates them. And there are crimes that are done just sort of on the spur of the moment. I think sort of shoplifting often is that. It's not planned. People see an opportunity and they just nick something. Sometimes it's for the thrill. But in the end, we can understand all we like, but it's still a crime. And if you don't have a punishment system as part of your judicial process, then I'm afraid that crimes are going to proliferate because there has to be a consequence to your action, doesn't there? And that is the case whatever the motivation for the crime. If there is no consequence, then crime is just going to increase. Now, to me, that seems very, very logical. But I accept that there are different views on this. Zero tolerance means one thing to one person and something very different to another. It does imply that you are going to increase sentences, for example, for even low-level crimes. I don't want to get to the point like the United States where I think they have, 2 million people in prison? We don't want that here. And I'm not suggesting that. To my mind, you've got to find appropriately severe sentences for serious crimes and find alternative ways of punishing people for less serious crimes and not send them to prison. I don't believe that people who fair dodge or who commit low levels of vandalism, or if you're sort of painting a train with graffiti or whatever, do I want to send someone to prison for that? No, I do not. But there have to be other ways of punishing them, the people that commit those crimes, other than prison. Let's go to, it is Aziz in Ealing. Hello, Aziz.
Hello. Thanks for taking my call. What bugs me is when people come along and speak about, when you speak about crime, the first thing they come to is about poverty and that being the cause of crime. And maybe one of the causes, but if you look in places like Southeast Asia, which have got abject poverty, they're not running around stealing or committing crime. So that was my case. And I think the other thing is there's got to be a much bigger deterrence of crime. And one of them is actually catching criminals. It's not about if we catch you, then this is a sentence you get. I think a lot of crime takes place because there is just an overwhelming chance of no detection. I'll give you, it's not quite low level, but do you know that terrible train tragedy where somebody, about a year ago, where somebody was stabbing lots of people on the train? Yeah. It came out that the night before, he'd actually gone to a barber shop and waved a knife around. If we had faster policing to catch him there, that train incident would never have happened. And I think that's what we need, much more proactive policing and much more rigorous policing. And I'm taking that extreme view now. But if you look at...
don't do that, Aziz. That's what got me into trouble with the last caller.
Well, I am taking a very extreme view. But if you look at like places like Saudi Arabia and, say, Dubai, they have virtually zero crime compared to the UK. Saudi Arabia, you steal something, you get your hand chopped off. I'm not advocating that at all. But as a deterrence effect, there is something there. And I think with a lot of crime in the UK, we have no deterrence. And that's why people are doing it, just because they can get away with it.
Do you think more police on the street is a deterrent?
Very much so.
Because the professor there, where the professor slightly lost me was when he said, oh, well, of course, in Hackney, we don't really do police on the street. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's probably why crime's quite high in Hackney.
Yeah, exactly. I think more police on the street and a faster response time to crimes as well. Rather than, there's somebody walking into my barbershop waving a knife around, we'll come back tomorrow and investigate. If they had somebody sent there and then, or within an hour or half an hour, and say if he's not at the shop, they can do a search around because it's a dangerous fellow, they would have stopped that terrible incident on the train.
Do you think as a society we possibly try to understand too much and we condemn too little?
I think there is no harm in trying to understand the causes of the crime, and I think that's very admirable. But I think at the same time we also need the deterrence effect. So we've got to hit it both ways. And I think we're understanding very little. We're not going into enough understanding. But certainly on deterrence, we don't have anything near it.
Yeah, and if you send a message as a supermarket chain or a major retailer that if you come into the shop and steal something, none of our security staff are going to try and apprehend you because they've been told not to. Well, what a surprise that shoplifting increases.
No, exactly. Well, look at driving on a motorway. The speed limit is, in London, the speed limit in certain parts of London is 20 miles per hour. You may like it, you may not like it, but that's what it is. And you know what? If you go at 23 miles per hour, you get sent a ticket. And there's a consequence for you doing that all the time. And I've unfortunately got too many of those. But the thing is, when there's a deterrence, we'll stop doing it. As opposed to 20 miles per hour, but you know what? We're telling you it's 20, but we're not going to do anything if you go over it. Then why would you even bother?
Aziz, thank you very much. Eric says, Iain, steal-to-order shoplifting should see harsher punishment, but many are struggling to feed their families. Major stores, energy companies who are making record profits each year should also be punished for thieving from the public day in, day out, says Eric. Here's another text from Eugene who says, I've listened to you for 10 years. I lived in London for 23 years. As a functioning alcoholic, I had lots of drunken stupidity crimes, and I think you would be a very good magistrate, says Eugene. That's not going to happen. But thank you for the compliment. Ranjit is in Albury. Hello, Ranjit.
Hello, Iain. How you doing, mate? I'd like to appear in front of that Marcus, to be honest with you.
Well, you think you'd get away with it?
Yeah, well, you would. I think he's if he's not a wind-up call, he's a proper fruitcake, mate. And normally I don't insult people, but you know what? You got patience of a saint to not get upset. You know, when I was 18 and a half, I applied to join the police. And I went to Lloyd House, which is our headquarters, and I was too short. He said, son, go home, you're too short. I said, okay. But I'm glad I never was in the police because I would have got sacked because I haven't got the temperament that's required, okay? You know, when you say about zero tolerance and that, okay, people want apprenticeships, yeah? You know, if you do a low-level crime, I will give you an apprenticeship to build more prisons. You'll learn how to be a brickie, you'll learn how to be a chippy, you'll learn how to be an electrician, because if you commit a further crime, you're going to be one of the inmates. Okay, there has to be a deterrent, Iain, and there isn't a deterrent. I've been in the shops, yeah, with my wife, and you know those big sacks from like sports shops, yeah, like put all your PE kits in for your football team. I've seen people go in with their forearm, fully load all the chocolates off the shelf. Now, these people that work in the shop aren't paid to be stabbed. The police ain't paid to be stabbed. But we can't go on like this. Now, the local shopkeepers that run the corner shop, they're losing out on trade as well because one of them having shoplifters in their own shop. And then if they can shoplift in these bigger supermarkets, Iain, they won't go to the local shop to buy something where they're going to pay for it, where the owner is a bit more vigilant than somebody that's on basic money. Now, I've got a lot of family that run shops. If they get £200 a day and 3 or 4 people nicking nearly $1,000's worth of stuff, how are they going to survive? And that's what I want to know. It's fine the politicians talking shop. They don't ever do anything. I've seen a bloke hit a policewoman and 6 police cars came with 4 big butchy blokes in there to get this one bloke. So the police will turn up when they need to, right? But when they don't want to turn, I'm not going to dish the police at all. They work hard. Loads of them come into my shop and they're very respectful people. And when you have a civil conversation with them, most of them really say, look, we're doing this job because it pays a mortgage. I don't know what you think about whether I'm being a bit right-wing, but I'd have zero tolerance on everything, especially knife crime. If you get caught carrying a knife, yeah, it's 2 years. You pull it out on someone, it's 5 years. You cut somebody up, it's 10 years. And if you kill someone, I'm going to put you in prison and you're never going to come out, mate. That will stop a lot of people carrying knives, and that is a very sore point in the Midlands.
That's an interesting point you make there, because the last government did actually increase the sentences for knife crime. But I don't think it proved to be any more of a deterrent. In fact, knife crime, I think, went up. Now, it is coming down a little bit now, but from a much higher level than it was. I don't think it necessarily follows that if you increase the sentences, that acts as more of a deterrent. I don't think people think like that when they're about to commit a crime.
I totally agree with you. I'm not going to disagree with you, but there's no stop and search. So people are walking around with knives when they're not being stopped and searched. If they were being stopped and searched, then there would be a deterrent because they're worried about getting caught. And I was talking to somebody today, about the next generation of children who were like 7, 8 years old. what's life going to be like for them? Forget about the 18, 19-year-olds now, because even though the statistics are coming down, right, I would bring back stop and search, mate, because at the end of but then the problem is who's going to do the stop and searches, because the last government cut the police force by 30,000. So, and Theresa May did say there's a correlation that, when there's less crime, you cut the police and the crime's going to go even further down. That was one of the most silliest thing that I've ever heard a Prime Minister say, because that's not what his Home Secretary say.
To be fair, there was a period where the number of police officers went down each year and crime did fall, but then it started rising again.
But I agree with that part as well, because you're agreeing too much at the moment.
I know,
right?
it's terrible, isn't it?
The thing is, because
let's get Marcus in Sheffield back on, Ranjit.
No, okay.
Said no one ever.
People had jobs. People had jobs there, right? If you're going to lose your house, right, you're going to be very careful about committing crime. If you haven't got nothing to lose, you don't give a damn, right? When we was kids, I'm in the same age bracket as you, right? You could buy a house with 3 times your salary. Now you can't even buy a house with 5 times your salary until we address that.
You're absolutely right, and that's where the social contract in society has started to break down. Where people in their early 20s, they maybe thought, well, I can't afford a house now, but I will be able to in 10 years. Nobody thinks like that anymore, do they? That is the intrinsic problem we've got. It's not just in the field of house buying as well. Ranjit, thank you very much indeed. It's 9:47.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Henry Riley.
As we enter the last day of campaigning ahead of elections dominated by political mudslinging, what lessons should we take away? And at 11, should nurseries be urged to report racism among toddlers?
Henry Riley at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Check your retirement savings are on track with PensionBee's easy-to-use app. Because when your pension is in a good place, you're in a good place. When investing, your capital is at risk.
Experience. It's knowing the difference between a good deal and, well, a great deal. Saga Travel Insurance covers most pre-existing medical conditions and has been named a Which Best Buy. Smart choice. And right now, you can get 20% off travel insurance until the 11th of June. Search Saga Travel Insurance for a quote today. New policies only, subject to medical screening. Standard and Plus, or Which Best Buys May 2025. Terms and conditions apply. Over 50s only.
The following is from TfL.
I got loads of flowers the other day. And messages from people I didn't even know. My mates spelled out my name in tea lights. And my mum hung my favourite footy shirt on the railings, next to the lamppost, where I got killed. By a nice lady. Just someone who thought it was okay to go a few miles an hour over the limit.
Speeding injures or kills over 1,000 people in London every year. Slow down. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Want to watch something on the bus without strangers turning it into a free viewing party? Now you see it. Now you don't. Keep your screen for your eyes only with built-in privacy display on the Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra. Save £336 when you buy at EE and claim a 14-inch Chromebook Go Wi-Fi worth £249. Better hurry, these deals won't wait around. Now you see it, now you don't. Combined offer ends 7th of May, saving over 24-month contract. Claim Chromebook from Samsung within 30 days. T's and C's apply.
Your time is valuable. Your perspective should be too. The Economist cuts through the noise with the stories that truly shape your world.
How can you believe that a new regime won't crush you just like the previous one?
Online scams are stranger than they've ever been.
When the world's turned upside down, know which way is up. Read, watch, or listen to The Economist.
Iain Dale on LBC.
10 to 10 on LBC. Jack says, I live in a village in a former coalfield area of Northumberland. The most prolific low-level crime in the village is shoplifting, mostly by addicts who tend to be either well-known in the area or soon will be. Mostly repeat offenders in and out of prison on short sentences. I think that the answer is better and more integrated services to help treat addictions. Most addicts are very damaged and lonely people who need expert treatment and care to get better. Cuts since 2010 have reduced what services there were to the bare bones. But if we don't treat these people, they have nowhere to go and the problems just get worse, ending up with more dehumanising street homelessness and complex social problems. Unfortunately, there is little public will to invest in addressing problems like this at source, as they see this as rewarding criminals and would rather spend public funds on the more deserving. Nobody ever wants to spend more money on improving the prison and criminal justice system and rehabilitation, even though it pays dividends to communities. Ask Lord Timpson or Rory Stewart or any other former prisons ministers. Well, I think, look, you do make a good point there. And maybe I didn't get that point across earlier myself, because I've done a lot of programmes on this radio station about sentencing, rehabilitation, and trying to invest more in the prison system, because I think there is a point that if you treat people like animals in prison, don't be surprised if when they come out they behave like animals. Why is it that when we know that people in prison come out, about 40% of them can't read and write when they come out of prison, and we expect them to reintegrate into society and get jobs? Well, that's not going to happen, is it? So I think that there is a real point there. And I think there has been a reluctance to spend money on prisons, which is ridiculous, because what I would do, I would actually close a lot of prisons and reduce the prison population from 90,000, say, to 60,000, which, yes, it would mean letting 30,000 people out, but maybe people on shorter sentences, and actually punish people who've committed serious crimes much more. So they are kept off the streets, because part of the whole point of putting people in prison is to keep them off the streets so they can't reoffend. That's where I would start if I was prisons minister. But the problem is the prisons minister is not in the cabinet. They're sort of deputy to the justice secretary. So there's only a limited amount that prisons ministers can actually do to make a real impact. But it is one of those jobs in government where people do slightly get religion on it, if you know what I mean. They see the way the system isn't working, want to do something about it, but never really get the opportunity because they're then reshuffled somewhere else. Right, let's go to Paul, who's in Worcester Park. Evening, Paul.
Evening. I've heard a lot of drivel being spoken tonight, especially by your expert guest. Listen, I think it's actually quite simple. What we need to do, and I'll explain why later on, from the very outset, when a youngster, 16, 17, commits a fairly minor crime, shoplifting, burglary, vandalism, they do a week in prison. And I'm not talking about the sort of prisons we have now. We could build a lot of Nightingale-style units. You do a week sitting in a nice, comfortable room in a cell. You don't do association. You don't go out for exercise. You stay in that cell for a week. You get served your nice meal.
And he was cut off. Oh, no, he's back. Sorry, Paul, your line went dead then, but are you back?
Yeah, did you hear how much of that did you...
I got most of it until the last 10 seconds.
Yeah, I just think from the outset, for your very, very first tiny crime, you do a week in prison. And if you do another small crime a bit later on, then you do 6 weeks in prison. And when I say in prison, I mean in a cell. No association, no wandering around, no visits. It's a short... You're talking about short, sharp treatment. No one gets short, sharp treatment. Short, sharp means you're punished early on in your offending career. You get it fairly soon after you commit the offence, and you do it. A long, long time ago, I was in the police for about 5 years. I used to notice that you've got guys who've got, say, 4 or 5 years in the prison after a long string of convictions, crying in the dock because eventually the criminal justice system had caught up with them. And we were partly to blame because we led these people to believe they could commit all these crimes and there would be no repercussions. And then suddenly they worked their way up in the serious mode. They did something serious and they got some serious bird and they'd be sobbing in the dock. You know, we need to get in early with these punishments. And I'll tell you another reason why you need prison. People often say, oh, more punishment should be handed out, like community service or this, that, the other. About 15 years back, I had to do a little bit of community service myself. And they're doing it with other guys who just weren't doing community service. And we used to say to them, well, you're not going to do any community service. Surely something's going to happen to you. And they say, what? They're going to send us to prison because they knew they weren't even going to send them to prison. At the end of the day, if you choose not to pay your fine or you choose not to do your community service or you choose not to do all those other things, what can be the final thing that makes you do those things? It has to be prison. People, these do-gooders, need to realise the only thing that villains are scared of is prison, which is why they spend so much time, villains, telling people how prison doesn't work, this and the other, because that's the only thing they don't like. The short, sharp treatment needs to be a week in prison early on in your...
Well, all right, let me put the counterpoint to that. You just said you did community service some years ago.
Yeah.
When I was 14 years old, I was caught stealing 3 C90 cassette tapes from Boots in Cambridge. Yeah. And I was put in a police cell when I was arrested. And I then had to go to court in Cambridge Magistrates Court. And I was given a conditional discharge. Now, do you think that the leniency of that sentence encouraged me to go and shoplift again? Or do you think the total humiliation of actually having to go through that experience meant that I never did it again?
No, I think because you come from a fairly good background like I did, the humility of all that sort of stuff was enough. But we're talking about people who then do go on to offend after these community service repeatedly, and they work their way up the ladder. I used to see people going to prison eventually for 18 months with a string of convictions, 50, 60 charges long over a period of years. And because these people never had been punished, they thought they never would be. It was a big shock to the system and quite unfair to them in some respect when they finally were with a hefty sentence. If early on, a week in prison is not going to damage someone, and it would be cheap because you're not employing one guard for 5 prisoners. You could have 100 people in a Nightingale-style prison, one guard because they stay in their rooms.
Paul, I don't know how long you're intending to listen to LBC this evening for, but if you're going to listen to Henry Riley, I warn you now, he's going to be completely insufferable this evening because the breaking news is that Arsenal are into the final of the Champions League after being Atletico Madrid 1-0 at the Emirates Stadium tonight. Henry is a big Arsenal fan. Woody, my colleague through the glass there, he's literally jumping out of his chair. They'll play either Paris Saint-Germain or Bayern Munich in the final in Budapest at the end of this month. So I don't know if you're a fan of Arsenal, Paul, but all Gooners just rejoice at that news. I rejoice at that news. I always want a British team to win in Europe, as long as it's not Spurs. Neil is in Hertford. Hello, Neil.
Oh, hello, Ian.
Hi. What would you like to say?
Hi, Ian. I just wanted to say that there seems to be a thing in this country, I've lived here all my life, right, where the police give up at some point with certain crimes, which everybody, in the Overton window, people don't, they're outside the Overton window. People don't think it's okay. And at some point, the crimes happen so much that the police give up. And I can't believe that this is the case with two things, which to me seem such a matter of health and safety, life and death, which is driving and carrying mobile phones, while operating the car or the vehicle. And then this modification of e-bikes, right? These are two things where I can see as somebody who's living here all my life. And I think with the e-bikes, it's as if the police, my interpretation is that the police sort of gave up before they gave up at first sight. Technology went too faster than the law, and police seem to just give up before they even start.
I think you make generally a very good point there, that it is wrong for the police to give up on solving any crimes. But we have to leave it there, Neil. Thank you very much indeed. Well, thanks for all of your calls, including that one, and messages this evening. I'll be back tomorrow from 7. If you missed any of this evening's show, you can, of course, listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news, videos and opinion. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's James Hansen. But right now, in for Ben Kentish, and I can't believe, Henry Riley, that you're not wearing your Arsenal shirt.
I know, I'm very happy. It was a stressful last 10 minutes in the office. Thank you very much, Ian. Although we've got you next week, haven't we? Good evening at 10 o'clock.
I think I'll be changing my vote.
They really should vote local elections on local issues.
So fingers crossed we might see a bit of a difference in council and government for once.
As we enter the last day of campaigning ahead of local elections that have been dominated by political mudslinging, national, even international issues, what should we learn from this campaign? At 11...
Racism is not about